Chapter 1. My name is of no worth to me. Well, congratulations, Izuku. The nice doctor smiled, putting her glasses atop her head. Izuku gripped his all-might figurine tightly, his eyes widening as his smile got wider. It looks like you have an emitter quirk. His mother gasped, tears welling in her eyes as she grabbed onto Izuku's hand and patted him. She seemed proud, and Izuku felt so happy being able to be the one to make his mother proud. Do you know which type? His mom asked. The doctor hummed. It seems to need a specific activation, though it shouldn't be difficult to figure out. Something that will relate to his everyday life, but I can't see exactly when he would need it to activate and be used. But as soon as that specification is met, he'll receive something. Possibly a reward of some kind. She smiled. You certainly have a lucky quirk, young one. She turned back towards his mom, and Izuku was holding back a happy squeal. He had a quirk. That was so exciting. If he needs help activating his quirk, or the specification seems to be too specific, call this number here. They have a quirk specialist who can help him pinpoint what it's causing. Now, you can decide to register his quirk today or register it once you know for certain what it does. His mother wrung her hands together, taking care to put the business card in her purse. Let's register his quirk later. The doctor nodded. Great, and very smart to do so, especially since re-registering takes a few tedious months to do. Thank you. Izuku hopped off of the examination table, bounding around on his toes. He was so excited. He could finally hang out with Kaken again and play heroes and villains without being stuck as a civilian all the time. Maybe he'd even be able to play other games with his classmates too. He grabbed a hold of his mother's hand, smiling widely and talking with her all about what his quirk was going to do for them when they got it to activate later. They tried a few things, with Izuku holding his breath for as long as possible, talking so fast it made his jaw hurt, and his mother's suggestion to play the quiet game and see if his quirk came in while he was being completely silent. Surprisingly, it didn't work. Izuku spent the weekend doing everything he could possibly try and activate his quirk with. He couldn't help it. He was just so excited, and he wanted to show it off to Kaken as soon as possible. He raced outside, pulling his mother along as they quickly made their way to the park that Sunday. Izuku looked around, grinning as he did so. It was finally time to tell Kaken what he had learned. And Kaken could totally help Izuku to get his quirk to activate. His friend was so cool and so awesome. Kaken could probably figure it out in one try. He grinned, running over to the bench they always meet at, bouncing on his toes as he looked around the playground, looking for Uncle Masaru and Kaken. Calm down, Izuku. His mother chuckled, watching him bounce around fondly. Izuku gasped. I can't calm down. I'm going to see Dash. Zuku. Kaken. He whirled around, smiling wildly when he saw his best friend walking alongside his father, his hands in his pockets. Did you want to play? Kaken asked, cocking his head towards the treeline. Izuku nodded eagerly. Stay where we can see you too, Uncle Masaru called after them. Izuku giggled as they walked away, slipping behind the bushes as soon as their parents were occupied with each other. Guess what, Kaken? What? We found out I have a quirk. Really? Kaken raised an eyebrow. Show me. I can't. It's not activated yet. Not activated? Nope, Izuku explained. I can't use it right now because I don't know how to turn it on. So, you don't have a quirk? Kaken frowned. Izuku shook his head. No, I have one. It just needs something to activate it. Kaken scoffed. That's stupid. My quirk came in just fine. What's wrong with yours? Nothing is wrong with it. I swear. Izuku defended himself, frowning when Kaken grinned. Yeah, right. You can't even activate it. That basically makes you useless, like a Dekunabu doll. Kaken, Izuku gasped, his bottom lip wavering as he struggled to hold his tears in. That's mean. I'm just telling the truth. Kakin defended himself. You're the one with a broken quirk. He trudged off, back towards their parents, and Izuku sniffed, letting himself cry for a few seconds before wiping his face, trying to make himself stop. When he got back out, Uncle Masaru and Kakin were long gone, only his mother sitting on the bench. He raced over to her, feeling so sorry that she had been left alone for so long. "Izuku," she said, cradling his face when he was close enough. "What's wrong?" Izuku shook his head, banishing the tears dripping down his cheeks with his balled-up fists. He refused to talk, and so, with a sigh, Inko grabbed him and walked them back towards their house. They ate in silence, they watched an all-night movie in silence, and Izuku went to bed completely silent. Izuku trudged to school the next day, not as excited as he used to be. He promised his mom multiple times that he was okay. Kakin was right, like usual. Izuku was just blowing it all out of proportion and being a crybaby about the silly name-calling. Still, it kinda stung when he thought about it. Izuku shook his head, determined to think about something positive before he walked through the primary school doors. He squeezed his mother's hand as they jogged across the street, looking around. He smiled, watching as the tree leaves swayed with the wind and how people were walking on the sidewalks, all doing different things. It was really cool watching as a woman with fox mutations walked past them, talking on the phone as she breezed past them. Quirks in general were really cool to watch in action. Maybe Izuku would get his at school today, especially since he'll be around more people and more new things. Izuku skipped, beaming up at his mom when she gave him a kiss before letting him run towards the school doors, grinning the whole way. He quickly changed his shoes and made his way into his classroom, sitting down with the other early kids who got dropped off before classes started. "Hey, I heard Zuku didn't even get his quirk yet?" One of the boys with a really long neck, Ito, taunted, walking up towards Izuku. He frowned. "I have one." "Oh really? Show us." Ito crossed his arms, tapping his foot to show his impatience. "Well, I can't do that. It needs to be activated first." Izuku corrected the boy. His friend, the boy with a comic head, stood next to Ito with a grin. "Really? It's like you don't even have a quirk to begin with." Izuku's jaw dropped. "Yes, I do." Kakin, who had been silent up until then, turned around in his seat, smirking as he crossed his legs and sat in his chair with his arms resting behind his head. "You know, since you can't even work your quirk, maybe you are a walking Dekunabu? Eh? And no." Kakin sked. "Ah, I can't hear you, Deku." Izuku's eyes filled with tears, rubbing them away as best he could before he closed his eyes, nearly gasping with what he saw. "1." Izuku opened his eyes, actually gasping when he saw the number 1 in the corner of his eye. Kakin frowned at him, but Izuku didn't pay him any attention. He was fascinated with what was happening. Maybe this was his quirk. He wondered what the number meant, what it might represent. Maybe it was a counter to something or for something. But what? "What are you mumbling about, Deku?" 2. Izuku grinned. "I think I just got my quirk." "It's wrong to lie." Kakin crossed his arms over his chest, frowning at Izuku. "Heroes don't lie." "I'm not lying." "Then what is it?" "I don't know." "That's so stupid. How would you not know?" Izuku shrugged, feeling giddy. "I just don't know. I'll tell you as soon as the doctors say what it is though." "TSK. I don't care either way, Deku." Kakin turned around, just in time for the bell. "Your quirk is still useless no matter what you think it is." Izuku ignored Kakin, focused on the number sitting in the corner of his eye and wondering what it meant, even as the teacher began class. It took forever before school was finally let out and Izuku raced out of school as fast as he possibly could, running towards his mother as he completely ignored his teacher's calls. They didn't matter to him right then. He needed to get to his "Mama!" he yelled happily, diving into her arms, giggling as she spun him around and placed him on her hip. "Hey, buddy," she smiled, kissing his forehead. "How was school?" "Mama, I think I got my quirk," Izuku squealed, bouncing a bit in her arms. "I can see numbers in the corner of my eyes, and it only happens when people talk to me." "Oh? How very exciting, Izuku." She sounded genuinely surprised, like she hadn't expected it to be so easy. "Well, I suppose that means we're gonna go see another doctor this weekend? Are you excited?" She set him down and Izuku ran around her legs before holding out his hand dutifully, letting her take the lead on the way home. "Am I?" Izuku answered, bouncing up and down. "I'm more excited than All Might is. I wonder what my quirk even means." She chuckled, crossing the street and nodding along to Izuku's eager rambling. The week flew by, with the numbers steadily climbing up whenever Kakin and everybody else used that nickname instead of his real name. He paid his peers and teachers no mind as he thought long and hard about what the numbers might mean for him. He had a few theories, but his mother told him he needed to double-check with the doctor first before he suggested anything. Izuku begrudgingly agreed with her. They walked into the slightly cold clinic that weekend, cartoon trees and children painted on the walls and along the ceiling. Izuku faced forward, willing himself to not get distracted. Check-in was quick, although the wait felt like forever until some lady came out from behind a door and called, "Midoriya." They made their way back to the room quick enough, and there, the doctor came in and hunched down in his chair, not paying much attention to Izuku until they ran a few tests. One on his brain and another on the back of his neck. That's when the doctor let him sit up and placed the images behind him, clipped up onto some white line. "With what we know, I think it's safe to say young Izuku here is capable of collecting money." The doctor spoke, sounding a bit in awe. "Money?" Izuku asked, tilting his head. "Yep," the doctor beamed, turning his laptop screen towards the two of them. "This right here, that's a routing number. It seems as though your brain is hardwired to be connected to a bank account, which you've been adding money to." His mother gasped, staring at the screen in concern. His brain. Oh my gosh, my poor baby. What is in his brain exactly?" The doctor chuckled nervously as she glared at the man. Izuku stared at him and kicked his feet back and forth, smiling at the man who looked increasingly nervous. "All right, well, ma'am. Here, it shows that little Izuku here was born with an extra piece connected to his brainstem, down here by the back of his neck. That has always been connected to an inactive bank account. Well, it used to be inactive. Apparently, whatever was the trigger for his quirk to activate is also the trigger for him earning approximately $1, or better known as almost 135 yen. Every single trigger." Inko's jaw dropped. Izuku grinned. "So I can make money? Just like Mama and Papi, right?" The doctor smiled at him, nodding towards him. "But, Izuku, I need you to think really hard for this one. Do you know what triggered the numbers to start rolling in and what keeps causing it?" "Deku. For your name is Deku now. Don't act like you're not." "Don't look at me, Deku." 15. Izuku shook his head, his smile firmly in place. "Nope." The doctor sighed. "Okay, well, we'll keep working at figuring it out. Besides that, it seems as though it's time to name your quirk. What do you like better? Money counter or dash?" "No," Inko shook her head. "No. Those records are public, aren't they? He'll be in unnecessary danger if we advertise him as an easy cash grab." She hummed to herself, snapping her fingers when she lit up. "Oh, I've got it. What if we called the quirk notes instead? As in banknotes. How does that sound?" Izuku smiled wider. "I love it." The doctor looked disappointed, but wrote it down and signed his name without any complaints. "Then that's all, Midoriya. I'll see you both for his physical exam in a year or so." Inko nodded. "Yes, we'll see you then." Izuku smiled, waving his goodbyes to the doctor with a staring problem. "We are never going to him again," Inko muttered under her breath as she opened the front doors and guided Izuku out of the office. Izuku hummed to himself happily, secretly delighted his mother didn't like that guy either. He seemed weird. The next time he had school, Izuku was excited. He had a confirmed quirk and couldn't finally tell Kakin what was going on. He raced into school, a bit sad when he Kakin surrounded by his other lackeys, but that was okay. He was sure he could tell him during recess. Except, that wasn't what happened. He had seen Kakin being mean to some kid and Izuku frowned, stepping in front of him, not understanding what was going on or why Kakin was being so mean. Ha! Kakin's hands sparked and Izuku glanced down at them, furrowing his eyebrows. What are you doing here, Deku? 43. Izuku grinned, keeping his fists tight. It's not nice to bully people, Kakin. The kid behind him groaned, rolling over and huffing, like that simple movement took a lot of effort. I am a hero, Kakin smirked, aiming his hands right at Izuku. I don't need to be nice to people like you, Deku. 44. Kakin's hands sparked and Izuku turned around, grabbing the other kid and moving them quickly to the other side of the tree, hearing Kakin curse when he couldn't see them anymore. Anyone who runs from a fight is a loser, just like you, Deku, Kakin yelled out before stomping away. 45. Izuku's eyes filled with tears as he listened to his friend turn his back, ignoring the other guy who had moved away scrambling to his own group of friends, leaving Izuku all alone. How annoying. Chapter 2. And a god complex sets in. Hey, Mama! Izuku smiled brightly, slamming the front door closed with his feet as he held tightly onto the paper bags filled to the brim with their groceries, shoving his new bright red shoes under the little bench and walking inside, dumping all of their things on the kitchen island. The years leading up to middle school hadn't been too easy, but Izuku thinks he's learned to cope pretty well. He threw his brand new backpack over towards the gen can, shrugging to himself when his books made a concerning clattering sound. Hopefully he remembered to take his phone out of the bag before he tossed it onto those weights sitting near the bench. Again. Honey, Inko called out from the bathroom, opening the door as she washed her hands. Is school out already? Izuku grinned as he opened up the fridge, putting their veggies away. Yep, Hinata-sensei released us early for good behavior. Oh, how wonderful. I'm just getting ready. All right. Izuku smiled at her, looking her over. Towards the end of primary school, they had decided Izuku needed a better hobby other than watching their bank account numbers rise and rise and rise. So they decided on yoga, which led to Izuku picking up weights and both of them going on early morning runs before work and school. Now, Izuku is as strong as he's ever been, and Inko has been as comfortable as she's ever been. She had slimmed down some and her shoulders were broad enough to give All Might a run for his money. Not really, but Izuku was never one to be reasonable with his compliments. She looked strong and fierce now, with her face slimmed down and her body being riddled with muscles. After Hisashi had decided to permanently move to America and leave Izuku and Inko for some other family, Inko hadn't been doing too great. She was worried and stress-eating all the time, trying to figure out if her nursing degree was still valid enough to get a job for the both of them. But, as it turns out, they didn't need her to get a job. Izuku had gotten rich. With all of the tauntings at school and even teachers slipping up on his name, Izuku had made more than enough for them to live comfortably. Of course, Inko didn't want to do that, so she started looking for a job and eventually found a good one at General Muzutafu Hospital as a part-time nurse. She reluctantly agreed to use his money towards the bills and shopping expenses, but she kept her job, claiming that since Izuku was bigger it didn't make sense for her to act as a stay-at-home mom. And, ever since then, Inko has slowly been getting more confident in herself. The amount of times she gets asked out when they go out for dinner probably contributes to that. Regardless, Inko found herself a date for the night, which was what she was getting ready for right then. She was ridiculously smitten with the guy even though Izu had never even met him. Currently, she was dressed in a mid-length light brown dress, one that flared at the bottom and had a few decorative brown buttons sewn in the front. It had thick shoulder straps and dipped down into a modest V-neck, which showed off the pretty jewelry she had decided to wear. She smiled at him as she put on a light pink lipstick. "Well? You look amazing, Mama." Izuku smiled at her, his eyes softening before he grinned. "Now, you make sure that you get back home before midnight. All right, young lady?" She chuckled, walking further out of the bathroom and into the kitchen where she ruffled his hair a bit, turning around to grab a glass of water for herself. Izuku glanced at her hair, smiling when he realized she had put it up in one of those intricate buns that made you think she spent 4 hours doing it. This guy must be really something special, huh? "Hey!" Izuku spoke up casually, closing the fridge. "Who is this guy anyways?" Inko sighed. "Honey." No, I know." Izuku waved her off. "But you could always just tell me his name and nothing else." She looked at him for a few seconds before rolling her eyes. "All right, but you only get to know if the date goes well." "Deal." Izuku grinned. She grabbed her pea coat, slipping it on before ruffling his hair once more and grabbing her purse. "Don't stay up too late tonight, all right?" Izuku gasped, putting a hand over his heart. "I would never." "MMHM." She eyed him before opening the front door with a huff. "I'll be back soon. Love you. Love you more." "That's impossible." She smirked, shutting the front door quickly before Izuku could get in another word. He shook his head, grinning as he fixed up a simple dinner for himself and ate, quickly cleaning off their dishes for the night before heading to his room. He walked into his room, kicking the door closed with his foot. His room wasn't too small, with his bed being lofted and his desk situated underneath it, a bean bag stuffed in the corner. His closet was on the other side, and although that was small, he didn't own an abundance of clothes, so he never minded. A laundry hamper was set in the corner, right next to the closet's pocket door, filled to the brim. He pushed the door open and finally changed into some decent clothes for the evening, grabbed his keys, waltzed out of the apartment and made his way outside. He tended to spend a few nights a week simply walking around, enjoying the night air and the different atmosphere of being outside later than most of the people. The streetlights were on already, even though the sun had yet to set, and Izuku smiled to himself, taking it all in. He turned the corner, glancing around the alleyway before walking through it. There were 2 dumpsters lined on the street and 2 more on the other side. One of them popped open with the top off and garbage bursting out of it. In front of him were a few cars and random street meters that were never used. He passed by the construction site, glancing over the half-built apartment building, and wondered how much busier this place was going to be once they're finished. Hopefully they get a parking garage around here sometime soon. Izuku thinks he would buy a cake just to celebrate something like that. Street parking was not for the weak. Izuku walked further, dipping in and out of other alleys, looking around and simply enjoying the night. That's when he heard a crash and a bang. He sighed. Izuku walked towards the noise, eyebrows raised and hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. He waltzed through the alley, ignoring the sounds of fighting going on as he picked up a can of old beans and hummed to himself. Kid, what are you doing out here?" some guy asked, the fighting stopping for a moment. Izuku cocked his head, looking at the 3 villains who were acting like idiots. He clicked his tongue. "I want you guys to call me Deku, please." The furthest guy furrowed what was left of his eyebrows, the street lamp shining on his bald head. "Why would we do that, kiddo?" Izuku dropped the can on beans in front of him, satisfied when it didn't explode everywhere. "It's just one word." He tried to encourage them. "Nothing too difficult for you, right?" "Sorry, kid, but I'm not calling you a nasty name like that," the bald guy said, shaking his head. Izuku towed at a can of beans, flipping it like a hacky sack and tossing it in the air before kicking it hard, nailing the idiot right in between his eyes. He groaned, falling backwards, landing with a thud and didn't get back up. Izuku huffed. "I warned you idiots to only call me Deku." "What the fuck?" one of them whispered. Izuku graciously pretended not to hear them. You get one more shot. Who wants to take it? Izuku smiled. The villains blinked at him. He blinked back. You make no sense, kid. One of them frowned, obviously not pleased with their discussion. I think making sense is optional, Izuku stated, flipping a new can of old beans around in his hand, smiling at the villains. Sometimes, I'm just talking. That doesn't even make sense. Izuku nodded solemnly. I understand. What? Izuku shrugged. He chucked the can of beans into the villain's head, frowning a bit when the guy went falling down. He was so disappointed they went down so easily tonight. Deku. 61. 995. 487. Izuku perked up, feeling his quirk respond to the name. He smiled at the last remaining villain. Well done. Do it again. The man sighed. Deku. His smile grew and the villain sighed again. Why do you even exist, kid? Izuku shrugged. I think I was born for shock value. What? He turned around, completely ignoring the question as he walked out of the alleyway. What a peaceful night it was tonight. He wasn't disturbed at all during the rest of his evening stroll and spent his time humming to himself and looking around, his hands stuffed into his pockets and feeling as laid back as ever. He got home, quickly taking a shower, changing, grabbing a snack and turning on the TV, ready to find something interesting to watch. He made it partway through a movie before he heard the sound of his mother coming back and quickly turned it off, making sure the apartment was dark as he sat and watched the door open. Inko sighed to herself, putting her coat up, and Izuku grinned. Oh, hello? Izuku smiled, dramatically turning on the lamp next to him, his arm brushing along the hanging tassels as the living room was illuminated in a warm yellow light. Inko rolled her eyes, setting her purse and shoes to the side before walking over towards the couch he was sprawled out on. Move over, sweetie, she said, a solemn tone to her voice. Izuku sat straight up. How'd the date go? Should I be looking for someone right now? Inko chuckled. This is why I stopped telling you their names in the first place, kiddo. Izuku shrugged, urging her to get on with it. And no, you shouldn't. The date was amazing. I was just sad because it had to end early. He calmed down then, rubbing her back. Oh, well, that's good. How was he? Nice? Did he pay? Inko chuckled. Yes, he was kind and sweet and very handsome. Izuku made a face but didn't comment. And he paid for our date, took my card and hid it from me until we made it out of the restaurant and everything. Izuku smiled, happy to hear it. It had been a recurring issue for his mother to be going out with men who wanted to split the bill or force her to pay because she had more money than them. But they had no sense of manners. And he's a detective. Isn't that something? She smiled. Izuku's eye twitched. A detective? He muttered to himself. Detectives don't die on the job like heroes do they? Is he in danger? Should I hire a PI? A bodyguard? Inko flicked his forehead. You will hire no one to watch after him. He'll be fine. Izuku pouted. But... No, I mean it. If I tell you his name, you need to leave him alone. All right? Inko stared him down. Izuku shifted uncomfortably. Fine. She smiled, getting off the couch and taking her coat off, leaving him hanging. Hey, wait, you gotta tell me his name now. Inko smirked, looking back at him. All right, buddy, but afterwards you need to get to bed. He nodded eagerly. Deal. All right, she sighed fondly. His name is Tsukachi Naomesa. He smiled at her, sending her his most innocent look. That is an interesting name. She rolled her eyes, heading to her room. Izuku smirked, memorizing the name he had been given. Detective Tsukachi Naomesa. Huh? Chapter 3. Properly meet your victim of choice. Izuku. He screamed, tossing his book into the air, and forced himself to sit casually in the armchair, looking towards his mother. Yes. Naomasa wants to have a family dinner together. She spoke, obviously trying to conceal her rather large smile. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? I know it's only been a few months, but… Izuku's eyes softened, smiling at her. Of course, I'd be honored to meet this man. Thank you, honey. Then she glared. Don't start looking after this man once you meet him, though. Okay? You need to promise me that you won't seek him out. I'm not allowed to seek out my new potential parental figure? Izuku gasped. Inko glared harder. Izuku sighed. All right. All right. I promise. To what? Izuku scowled. To leave Tsukachi alone for the rest of his days. Inko paused for a second before nodding. Good. So, tell me what he's like. Izuku beamed, pretending like he had no idea who this man was. Really, Inko had quite the fighter spirit, but Izuku had gotten curious as soon as the first date happened. Which means he knew exactly who the detective was. But it was still endearing to watch his mother light up when she talked about his favorite color and other things that don't really matter. So he'll keep his mouth shut about it. Just this once. You'll see soon. She grinned. Tsukachi wants to have dinner this week. Does Friday sound good to you? Izuku smiled. Sure, that works for me. She narrowed her eyes. I thought you didn't like surprises? I don't, Izuku confirmed. She stared at him longer. So, you're not at all concerned about waiting until Friday to learn about him? Izuku shrugged. Why worry over what I cannot control? Izuku, she sighed. Just don't ask personal questions during the dinner. Personal questions? I can't ask him about… You know what I meant. Don't ask about an old 20-year charge. Don't ask about his family. Things that you shouldn't know. Izuku hummed. I'll do my best. Izuku Midoriya. I'll ask him the most boring questions known to man. She nodded sharply. Good. Izuku held back his sigh, unsatisfied with his restrictions. Then again, his mother has never told him to not ask about their personal lives. Maybe this detective was something special? Izuku hummed to himself. He'd be the judge of that soon enough. No way was he letting his mother surround herself with undeserving and, worst of all, ugly men. She didn't need that in her life. If he needed to, he'd pay All Might himself to take his mother out on a date just so she can be treated correctly if that's what it took for her to avoid dating losers. But Izuku will hesitate to judge until he actually sees Tsukachi in person. Who knows? Maybe the man could be uglier in real life and it would take even less time to get him to stay away from his mother. He already had a few things in his favor. For one, Tsukachi was actually a few years younger than his mother. Not by much, but enough that Izuku could bring it up, and if he spun the story right, it would be a con against the man. It also helped that the man was in major crimes, which meant the man was absolutely traumatized. Point in favor of Izuku, especially if the man refused to address it and was emotionally unavailable. On top of that, the man could be one of those policemen, of which Izuku will be inclined to take care of the man himself. The detective was much more high-profile than anyone else he's ever dealt with, but he's sure he can make the man crack if the guy ever tried to lay a hand on his mother. It wouldn't be the first time Izuku would have needed to get creative, to get men to leave his mother alone. There was a reason Hisashi decided to stay in America forever and send divorce papers their way the day he called Izuku in hopes of reconnecting. Izuku sighed, a small smile slipping onto his lips. Yes. He's sure everything would come together quite easily once he was intimately involved with the detective and his mother's relationship. Time flew by quickly enough and it was suddenly Friday. His mother was redoing the tie around Izuku's neck. He was stuffing his dress shirt into his pants and they were both freaking out since they were a few minutes behind. Okay, there you go. His mother cheered. pulling away and revealing a beautifully done tie. She ran towards the bathroom, probably to retouch her makeup. "Thanks, Mama," Izuku called out, turning around and grabbing his socks off the couch, quickly putting them on and praying to everything holy that his nice shoes were in the drawers in their genkan. "Okay," she called out, grinning wildly as she pushed her hands over her regal-looking dress. "How do I look?" "You look like 1,000,001 yen, Mama," Izuku said quickly, putting a watch around his wrist. She huffed. "Look up." Izuku did as she asked and smiled at her long dress, the intricate designs flowing around the hems and her long trench coat flowing along with them. He caught a glimpse of her silver jewelry, a ring on her finger and a small silver bracelet. He grinned. "You look like a goddess, Mama. Are you ready?" "Yep." She grabbed her purse and they quickly took off. They had decided to meet Tsukachi for dinner only a few blocks away from their own home, which meant they had more time to get ready and get comfortable. That also meant they would have no great reason to say why they were late since they lived so close. They walked across the street, nearing the restaurant they were going into. Izuku immediately locked onto the detective, eyeing the black dress pants the man had on, the button-down and the tan trench coat that looked like it had seen better days. "Be nice," his mother whispered before smiling and waving to the detective, pulling him along. Izuku stared at her, completely aghast, like he would ever be rude to one of her dates. "Hi, Naomasa," she said, a bit breathless. "This is Izuku Midoriya, my son." The detective bowed towards him with a gentle smile. "It's wonderful to meet you, Midoriya." Izuku bowed back, much shallower than the detective had done so. "Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you as well." Inko elbowed him in the ribs before smiling pleasantly towards the man. "Well, shall we go inside?" Tsukachi beamed. "Sounds great." Izuku narrowed his eyes. This was weird. The man had no glaring red flags sticking out. "Never mind." Izuku shook his head as he followed them through the doors and towards their table. He's sure he'll find them in no time. They sat down and ordered their dinner quickly enough and without any obvious problems. And then, "So, Midoriya, what do you enjoy doing?" Tsukachi asked, smiling at him. "Any exciting hobbies?" Izuku blinked before glancing over at his mom, unsure of what to say. She cleared her throat. Izuku likes to do many things, though I'm afraid he's gotten quite attached to numbers." "Numbers?" Izuku nodded, realizing where his mother was going with this. "Math is my favorite subject, so I tend to enjoy learning about numbers. My favorite number is 8. Tsukachi hummed. "That's a strong number." "I thought so," Izuku asked, eyes flicking over to the man who had just been seated across from them. The guy looked skeletal with his thin frame and his hanging bangs in his piercing blue eyes. Izuku stared at him as the guy stared back, looking incredibly uncomfortable with being caught, though he didn't stop. Izuku stuck his tongue out, crossing his eyes as he did so. "Izuku? Thoughts?" "Not even one." "What?" Izuku blinked, looking back towards his mother. "What?" She sighed and Izuku internally winced. He didn't mean to get caught up in such an intense stare-down with the skeleton-looking guy in the opposite booth. It just sorta happened. "What are your thoughts on this new vigilante Tsukachi is dealing with? What was his code name again?" Tsukachi smiled. "The precinct calls him the Taunter, since he's reported to get into verbal fights with the villains before knocking them out with random trash found in the alleys." Izuku hoped his face was blank because he was having a heart attack. They're calling him the Taunter. What kind of awful name even was that? "The Taunter," Izuku said flatly, doing his absolute best to avoid sounding as exasperated as he felt. "Well, I think as long as bad guys are off the streets, they're doing a great job." Tsukachi nodded with an easy smile. "Is that how you feel about all vigilantism?" Izuku shrugged. "Depends on the vigilante. Some are basically villains, others are just kinda there." I don't know too much about them, though. Tsukachi's eye twitched and Izuku stared at him for a second, before it clicked. Tsukachi Naomesa. Quirk. Lie detector. Ah fuck. Izuku cleared his throat. But, I have the opinion that knowledge is subjective since there's so much of it, so who knows, maybe I do know a lot about vigilantes. He chuckled awkwardly, watching as the man in front of him nodded, a bit more surely. Ah, I see, Tsukachi said, smiling at him once again. What's your opinion on all of it? Izuku asked, feeling both curious and ready to stop the onslaught of questions towards him. Tsukachi hummed. I think there are plenty of legal ways to help people, and becoming a vigilante is, as you said, often a slippery slope towards villainous activity. Izuku grit his teeth, trying not to smirk at the man's response. What a straight-laced man. Maybe that's what his mother finds so intriguing about the detective. So, would you say vigilantism is as bad a villainy? Izuku asked. Tsukachi shook his head. Nope. They just need a guiding hand to get back on the right side of the law. Izuku hummed, wondering if he should debate this with the man. Vigilantes had access to be able to act as a hero without the restrictions they faced, making them a perfect middleman. In Izuku's opinion, vigilantes had the potential to balance out villains and heroes. Of course, he's never seen that happen before, but he knew it had the potential to work because he's seen it in other aspects of life. People with money always stick their nose into politics simply because of the networking market available there, and while lobbyists like to guide their pockets and activists like to guide their hearts, politicians were the ones who actually made the decisions. He wondered, just for a moment, if that's why there was such a fight against vigilantes going on right then. Maybe they didn't like the idea of bringing true balance to their country. They only wished for heroes to be around without villains to fight. Izuku shook himself out of his thoughts, smiling at his mother. I apologize. I must have zoned out or something. What were you saying? Tsukachi smiled warmly. I was just saying how lovely it was to have met you. It looks like I need to get back to the precinct, but thank you for joining me for dinner. Izuku looked at him and nodded when he saw his mother give him a stink eye. This was fun, Tsukachi. I hope we won't be strangers. Tsukachi laughed a bit breathlessly. No, I certainly hope we won't be. Goodbye. Bye. Goodbye. They sat at the table, both staring at each other before Izuku sighed. He's not bad. His mother lit up. I thought so. You want to get going then? Izuku nodded and they walked out together, smiling up towards the sky and breathing in deeply at the same time. That was fun. So, you'd like to do this sort of thing again? His mother asked hopefully. Izuku nodded. I wouldn't mind. Oh, I'll tell Naomesa when we get home then. I'm sure he'll be ecstatic. She grinned as they crossed the street. Now was so worried about tonight and I can't tell you how happy I am that you liked him. Did I tell you he even bought cuff links to try and impress you? Well, he didn't really know what to use them for, but the point still stands. Izuku smiled to himself, walking with his arm linked with his mother's and looking around as he led them home, listening to her go on and on about how interesting Tsukachi was. He hummed as a response to her when she got quiet while he thought to himself. He was almost proud of who he had met today. It seemed as though the detective was the perfect choice for his mother. He found that he was far from disappointed with that. Chapter 4 Money Talks. Izuku Taunts. Izuku ignored his homeroom teacher once again, sighing as he dropped his chin into his palm, looking blankly at the whiteboard. It had been a long few months, with Izuku running around making money from stupid villains and spending his time getting more familiar with Tsukachi being in their home, obviously in the mind-numbingly slow process of moving in with them. He contemplated telling the man he was fine with it, if only to make him stop looking like a deer in headlights every time he came over with a duffel bag. But then Izuku thought about it some more. He decided he needed more entertainment in his life, so he would not be telling the detective anything. Izuku has full confidence that the man can figure it out. Eventually, Izuku blinked out of his little trance just in time to see his homeroom teacher grin at him. Oh boy. Ah, it looks like Midorimama is applying to UA as well. 62-001 876. Izuku blinked at the man, wondering if he should be impressed or annoyed with the lengths the man will go to in order to say his name incorrectly. He landed somewhere in the middle. Ha! Kaken sounded genuinely confused as he dropped his head, looking back at Izuku. But why? What's there for you? Izuku shrugged. That's where you're going, Kaken. The boy scowled. You, don't follow me into heroics. Deku, you wouldn't even last a day in there. Doesn't hurt to try. Izuku smirked, tilting his head. Kaken scowled deeper, but turned back around and stared at their teacher, who was waiting for them to be done before he could speak to them again. Izuku grinned to himself as he thought about it. Of course he was going to follow Kaken into school. He's not sure how tolerant other high schools were about bullying and name-calling, but he's positive that if he went to school with Kaken, no one would blink twice at the nickname. Kaken has been calling Izuku Deku since they were children. It sounded different than the villains who tried to insult him. It sounded different than the one-off bullies who only wanted to get a rise out of him. Only Kaken managed to make it sound natural enough to fly completely under the radar, which was the sole reason why Izuku was following him UA. That, and he really wanted to meet all of the heroes that worked there. He wondered if he could get Nizu's autograph. Maybe even Present Mike would be willing. Ring. I'll see you all on Monday. Have a restful Sunday, their sensei called out. Izuku yawned, packing away his things and blinking the sleep out of his eyes, startling a bit when Kaken's smoking palm slammed down on his desk. Oh, Kaken. Haha. Ooh, you gave a bit of a heart attack there. Izuku chuckled, putting his backpack over his shoulders with an easy smile. What's up? Stop following me, Kaken demanded. Izuku looked around awkwardly before nodding. All right? Do you want me to get someone to change our seats next week or? Shut up, Deku. You know what I'm talking about. Do not follow me to UA. Izuku chuckled. Oh, that. Haha. You'll be okay, Kaken. It's a pretty big school. I'm not even sure we'd see each other there. Just don't go. Kaken growled. Wow, he seemed really upset about this. Aren't you going to be a hero, though? UA has really good programs like management, and I think that would be super fun to do. He smiled. I won't follow you, Kaken. Their other courses aren't worth going for. Kaken scoffed. Just look it up. Izuku chuckled, slipping out of his chair. I swear they detailed it on their website somewhere. I think their support course competes with I-Islands. Kaken frowned. Are you going with their support course then? Izuku smirked. Don't be silly, Kaken. I don't make things like that. He walked out the classroom door, still smirking as he dipped around the corner and peacefully walked out of his middle school. He walked further into the inner city, wanting to get something while he was out and about. He dipped into an alleyway, kicking around a rock, tapping it up and on his heel before kicking it into a neighboring wall. Izuku turned his attention to a can and carelessly kicked it, watching it bounce off the alleyway before it landed and hit some homeless guy on the head. The man cracked a beady eye open, his golden eyes glaring at him. Izuku shrugged, grinning a bit. Sorry about that, old man. Izuku apologized, doing his best not to sound sorry at all. Didn't mean to. Right? Move along, problem child. The guy muttered. 62-001 879. Izuku beamed. Thank you, sir. Have a great day. He ran along, not wanting to get stabbed for egging the man into insulting him. Izuku, try as he might, had very few self-preservation instincts when it came to making money, but the few that he did have were always working overdrive. He ran home, haphazardly dropping his stuff in his room and changing into his favorite brown hoodie, tan cargo pants, and a ball cap before heading out again. smiling as he breathed in the air and walked around. It felt nice to walk around, finally out of a building and breathing in something other than an abundance of body spray and gross children's body odor. Every time he went outside, it was like he was breathing in the fresh smells of a fairy tale. Well, right now, since he was headed towards a city park, the trash beach smelled as bad as the school did. Someone really needed to take care of that makeshift landfill. He walked through the park, weaving throughout the trees and eventually ending up close to the inner city. Izuku shrugged, making his way down an alley as he thought about what kind of food he could grab while he was out. Izuku smacked his lips, nodding to himself. Oh yeah, food sounded amazing right about now. Are you stupid? Just hand over the money. Izuku stopped, glaring down the alley he was about to pass by. He shrugged to himself, happy for an opportunity to have some stupid villain pay for his food for the night. Hey, Izuku called out as he walked down the alley, grinning at the three idiots in front of him, obviously in the middle of a deal of some sort. Perfect. Maybe he'll be able to get them to make him lots of money tonight. Who's up for some insults tonight? One guy shook his head. Nope. Kids are creepy, man. I'm not dealing with that, the guy said, backing away. His company nodded, following after him, and walked away from Izuku quickly. Oh, come on. Running away from insults now. Izuku sucked on his teeth. That's just sad. HM. Izuku froze, not wanting to turn around and see who was behind him. He shook his head. I'm fine, thank you. If you'll excuse me. Kid. Izuku kept walking. So, you're the taunter, aren't you? Izuku stopped, groaning a bit and letting his head hang. The name is going to be the death of me, I swear. You understand that you're committing acts of vigilantism, correct? The man behind him said. Izuku frowned, turning around to argue his case before stopping short. In front of him stood a man with shoulder-length black hair, a scarf around his neck and a black jumpsuit adorning him. His eyes were nearly golden and Izuku stared at his face for a few more seconds before it hit him. This was the homeless guy from earlier. Izuku sighed, disappointed in himself. He should have known he was being stalked after that little stunt. But, just for the record, Izuku would like to plead his case. He wanted to make money. He taunted the homeless guy into calling him names, which made him money. Izuku went about his day. Really, he knew it was bad, and sure, he felt bad for the guy. But come on, it was money. How's it going, man? Izuku grinned, putting his hands on his hips. Listen, about earlier, I understand it was rude, and I'm sorry about that. Never meant to hurt you. Honest. Would you like some money? I can help with whatever you need. The man's hair lifted slightly along with his scarf, presumably out of anger. If that was his quirk, how cool. And then Izuku paused. He stared at the yellow, gaudy goggles wrapped around the man's neck and felt his jaw drop. Oh shit, that was... so, not a hobo then. Eraserhead smirked. Nope. Well, Izuku chuckled uncomfortably. You could just pretend you never saw me, right? Eraserhead shook his head slowly and Izuku swallowed heavily, eyeing the man's capture weapon. Oh, he was gonna meet the gods tonight, wasn't he? Can I at least get a head start? Izuku pleaded. Eraserhead grinned. Izuku groaned, bouncing with every leap Eraserhead took across the rooftops. I am very capable of walking, you know? Been doing it since I was young. You are young. Younger than, Izuku responded, rolling his eyes. Come on. I mean, you don't actually travel like this with villains, do you? Eraserhead pulled him over, still keeping Izuku wrapped up like a mummy, hanging slightly off the ground, looking Izuku in the eye before shoving the precinct doors open. Anyone who looks younger than 7 gets to ride in the capture weapon. I'm surprised you don't feel special. Izuku gaped. Are you serious? 7. That's as high as you can give me. He groaned dramatically. Oh, My street cred is gonna be in shambles because of you. Eraserhead rolled his eyes. A toddler your age shouldn't have street cred. A toddler? Izuku huffed. I cannot believe I'm being roasted by a wannabe mummy. Shut it, kid. Izuku clicked his tongue. Can dish it out but can't take it. For shame. Tell the detective I have someone here for him in room 2. Eraserhead told the front desk, ignoring Izuku's complaints. Ugh, how rude. Eraserhead dragged Izuku away and into the room, looking more suited for interrogations than this impromptu interview with each other. He stood in front of Izuku as he placed him into a chair, finally freeing him from that stupid capture scarf. Izuku flexed his hands, rolling his neck out and sighing, satisfied when he heard his neck cracking. Eraserhead made a face and Izuku contemplated turning so he could crack his back this time when the detective opened the door and walked in, not looking up from the file in his hand. The man nearly bumped into the table and Izuku blinked at him, wondering how overworked Naomasa might be to be able to wander in this room without looking up. How was this man so painfully insane? Or maybe he was just tired. He looked like he got as much sleep as Eraserhead did. That was concerning. Naomasa finally looked up as he sat down in front of him and let his jaw drop open, staring at Izuku like he had never seen him before. Izuku laughed uncomfortably, shaking his matted curls out as he gave the two men a lopsided smile. Well, how's it going, guys? Weather treating you nice enough? Your mother is going to beat your ass, Tsukachi blurted out, still staring at him. Izuku sucked on his teeth. That may be true, but I have a proposal. A proposal? Tsukachi repeated dryly. Izuku nodded eagerly, a sly smirk slipping onto his lips as he leaned forward. Absolutely. How about we release me, forget about all this, and I go on my merry way? No, Eraserhead answered easily. Izuku pouted. I can pay you handsomely. Eraserhead rolled his eyes. I'm sure I'll live. Izuku grinned as Tsukachi groaned. Oh, but I can let you live in luxury. Just name your price. I promise I can deliver. We're not some street thugs you can pay off, kid. Tsukachi groaned, lifting his head from out of his hands. Don't try and pay off pro heroes, Izuku. Izuku gaped at the man. Oh, come on now. Do we really need to tell Mom right now? He glanced at the time, internally wincing at how late it was. We could wait until morning. I won't tell anyone. Eraserhead looked at the pair incredulously, eyes widening as Tsukachi seemed to consider it. Detective. He coughed into his fist, looking at the pro-hero shamefully. Sorry. No, Izuku, we cannot wait to tell your mother. We need to let her know. Now. Tsukachi glanced at Eraserhead, staring at the man for a few seconds before sighing and picking up his phone. Izuku dropped to his knees, looking towards the ceiling. Dear God, please be with me during these trying times. Kid, shut up. Eraserhead groaned. Tsukachi shook his head. Hold on, Eraser. Izuku, pray for me too. What? To any god that can hear me and is capable of going up against my mother, please spare me and Naomasa from her disappointed face. I will be grounded for a month and that's no fun, especially when she freezes my bank account. Dear heavenly and divine beings. Kid, shut up. Eraserhead called out, rolling his eyes at Izuku, who looked very close to tears. Now, Izuku whined, tears building in his eyes as he let his lip tremble, giving the man the strongest puppy dog eyes he could manage. Please. The man nearly caved right then and there. Tsukachi, Eraserhead called out, breaking the spell. Izuku scowled. Get on with it. Right. The man's hands were shaking as he brought the phone up to his ear, and Izuku couldn't blame him. He looked up to the ceiling once again. What? Izuku started praying again. Kid, calm down, all right? You're making it worse than it needs to be. Eraserhead spoke up, grabbing a jelly packet, twisting off the cap and slurping it down in one go, not breaking eye contact with him. Izuku shuddered. Maybe the man really was just some homeless guy. I heard that, Eraserhead muttered, glaring at him. Izuku smiled sheepishly, shrugging a bit. He found it insulting when the man rolled his eyes. I'm on my way. Izuku looked around, staring at the two-way mirror glass thing in front of him. He had seen that multiple times in shows and old movies, but never has he gotten the opportunity to see the thing in real life. This was kind of exciting. No, Naomasa said firmly. Izuku turned back around and frowned at the man, who crossed his arms. No, don't even think about the observer mirror. Izuku hummed. So that's what it's called. Kid, shut up and sit down, Eraserhead said, leaning against the wall and looking 4 breaths away from falling asleep right then and there. He was almost impressed. Tell me where my son is right now, Sansa, or you will be lacking more than a few whiskers. Izuku winced at the same time as Naomasa. Ah, I understand now, Eraserhead muttered before sitting down, freezing in his chair and doing his best to go unnoticed. Izuku scowled at him. Zuku, Inko called out from around the corner. She slammed the door open and they locked eyes from across the room. Izuku gulped. Hey, Mama. Izuku Midoriya, what the hell were you thinking? She stood in front of him, hands on hips, tapping her foot and glaring him down. Izuku cracked. I'm so sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to. Izuku, were you really acting as a vigilante? He grit his teeth. Only technically. Izuku, Midoriya. Izuku winced. Have you been acting as vigilante? Yes. Just one more question, Izuku nodded hesitantly. Why on everything holy are you frolicking around to fight villains? Oh, Izuku sucked on his teeth. I think that's a question we can worry about outside. Do not try to be funny with me right now, young man. Izuku panicked. I'm not. I promise, Mama. Just, I can explain better without you know who listening in. She softened. Do you not want Naomasa to know? Oh, I don't mind if he knows. He's basically my dad anyways. Izuku leaned closer. That's Eraserhead. Inko blinked, looking at him incredulously. You don't want to tell me because Eraserhead is here. Izuku nodded and she sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. You've got until the count of 10 to tell me what was going through your mind. What? Unless you'd like to deal with a frozen bank account for a few weeks. She smirked. Izuku pouted, crossing his arms, looking back and forth between a highly amused Eraserhead, a worryingly teary-eyed Naomasa, and his stern mother. Do you want to be a hero? Is that it? She asked softly. Izuku shook his head. No, not really. It's just, the villains, they make me money. They make you money? Inko gasped, grabbing his shoulders. Are you a hitman? A hitman? Izuku cried. Mama, no. She gasped, tears welling in her eyes. You're not a pimp, are you? Mama. He heard Eraserhead snort and whipped his head over, glaring at the man. Of course not, Mama, you know that. Promise. I just really like money. And, well, small villains always make me money, so I just… Izuku. Inko sniffed, looking at him exasperatedly. We're not in need of money. The numbers look nicer when they're higher, though. Izuku pouted. She sighed. I'm sure they are, baby. But I refuse for you to go out in the middle of the night messing around with villains just because it makes money. It makes a lot of money, Izuku muttered under his breath. Inko rolled her eyes. Does not matter, kiddo. You need to be safe. Yeah, I know, Izuku said, looking ashamed. He really didn't mean to make his mother worry so much, but he couldn't help it. The way those numbers looked going up and up and up. They were so pretty. As long as you know. Inko sighed then. We'll talk about your punishment later. Now, is he in any legal trouble I should know about? Izuku turned, seeing the man blink rapidly, obviously trying to get rid of his tears as he shook his head and looked down at his file, flipping through his papers hurriedly. He should be fine since it's his first offense and whatnot. He sniffed, loudly. Are you all right? Inko asked, eyebrows furrowing. He just called me Dad. Naomasa smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. Izuku blinked at the man. I think you got hit with the Midoriya Tears curse. He smirked, leaning on the interrogation table with his forearms. Looks like you're part of the family now, whether you like it or not. Oh my gods, Eraserhead whispered, staring at the three of them like they were all sociopaths. For such a terrifying hero, Eraserhead sure was dramatic. Chapter 5, Whispering Secrets to the Devil. A week later, Izuku stumbled into class, kicking the door closed and seating himself behind Kaken, ignoring the way his math teacher paused the lecture to glare at him before continuing. He set his things down, grabbing his notebook and flipping it open, pretending to be the perfect model student who just happened to show up to class late. Izuku slouched 4 seconds later. Where were you? Kaken scowled, whispering back to Izuku as their math teacher droned on and on about something. Izuku perked up. Aw, Kaken, Izuku grinned, leaning across his desk. Were you worried about me? Kaken scoffed. In your dreams, Deku. 63, 565, 128. Izuku sighed happily, falling back into his seat, away from his friend. Yeah. Kaken whirled around. What did you just say? Izuku frowned. What do you mean, Kaken? Say what? He pretended to light up. Oh, did you want to hear about my dreams? Kaken made a face and glared at him. No, just shut up, Deku. 63, 565, 129. Izuku grinned. Are you sure you don't want to hear about it? It was pretty cool. I think you ended up being the next number 1 if I remember right. Of course I don't want to hear about it. Kaken frowned, looking back. And, of course I ended up being the number 1 hero. It's my destiny. Izuku nodded. So true. And I would wait. Just, I don't want to talk to you, stupid nerd. Kaken forced himself to face forward, glaring at their mathematics teacher, droning on and on about basic algebra. Izuku smirked, leaning on his desk, closer to Kaken. I thought you'd want to hear more about it. I even thought up of some new design ideas for your hero costume. It was so cool. Kaken scowled, grumbling lowly. Leave me alone, Deku. 63, 565, 130. I'm trying, Kaken. Izuku apologized. Sorry. Midoriya. Izuku snapped to attention, looking around awkwardly as he finally noticed the eyes on them, including his teacher. Oh dear Lord, come up here and solve this, since this lesson is so boring to you that you need to bother Bakugo-kun right now. 63, 565, 131. Izuku grinned. Of course, sensei. He got up, dutifully stepping over Kaken's stuck-out leg and making his way up to the front, rolling his eyes at the basic equation. His interest in numbers might stem from being forced to see them everywhere he went, but in his mind, numbers usually equal money, and really, how was he expected to hate a subject when that was his reward for playing around with numbers all the time? Besides, math had always clicked for him like a puzzle piece, something he cherished since most of his classmates, including Kaken, did not have a good relationship with numbers. At all. Seriously, their math homework was laughably terrible to look at. Izuku hummed to himself, looking over the equation once again. It was nothing hard, simply the Pythagorean theorem, which sounded terrifying to learn about, but it was just math. In front of him, the board had a picture of a triangle on it, numbers and letters written on each side. Beside it, the equation S superscript 2 plus B superscript 2 equals C superscript 2 was written out. Izuku picked up the marker. The A side of the triangle had the number 8 written there, and the B side was 7. Izuku wrote it out, replacing the equation. Quickly, he rewrote it, changing it from 8 superscript 2 to 64 and 7 superscript 2 to 49. Izuku solved it, adding the two numbers together before writing out his final answer, C equals square root 113, and smiled to himself. Izuku put the marker down, staring at his teacher, daring to be told he did it wrong. The man scowled. Go back to your seat, Midorimas. 63, 565, 132. Izuku beamed, turning around and walking back, plopping down into his seat, reopening his notebook dedicated towards quirks and started doodling. He poked Kaken's neck with the back of his pencil, smiling when the boy glared at him. In my dream, you were wearing skinny gauntlets to better help with your aerodynamics when you fight in the sky. It was totally awesome. Kaken scowled. That sounds stupid. Izuku shrugged. Cost-effective and practical. I thought you'd like it. Well, you thought wrong. Guess so. Show me, Kaken demanded. Izuku tilted his head, smirking when Kaken sighed and gestured for his notebook. Izuku obediently handed it over. Kaken flipped through a couple pages, huffing. There is zero math in this. Izuku rolled his eyes. Why would there be? He's just teaching us the basics. Kaken snarled, but didn't say anything. He knew he had a free pass to come to Izuku should he ever want help with his math homework. But the boy was prideful. So much so that he suffered through the imperfect grades just to keep himself above from asking for help from the lowly Deku. It was honestly one of the most amusing things in Izuku's life. There's dimensions of my forearms in here? Izuku shrugged. Simple guesswork. Kaken rolled his eyes. MMHM. Izuku blinked. For some reason, Kaken did not sound convinced. He wondered why. You drew them ugly. It's a rough sketch. Still ugly. Izuku sighed, pouting a bit because Kaken found his designs ugly. Maybe he could spend the next few weeks redrawing his sketches. That way, if Kaken ever sees them again, he won't be disappointed. With a huff, Kaken passed his notebook back to him, keeping his head faced forward as he stared at their math teacher. Izuku smiled, happy his friend had actually looked at the designs. Are you sure you're not going to the support courses at UA? Kaken asked. Izuku grinned. Aw, did you want me to make your gauntlets for you? I'm sure I could arrange something dash. No, just ugh. Absolutely not, Deku. Kaken defended himself. All right, Izuku shrugged easily. Then why ask? That's the only course that can compete with heroics in UA. Kaken responded like that was obvious information Izuku should have been well aware of. The bell rang then, and everyone packed up their things. Izuku stood out of his seat and shoved all of his things into his bag, uncaring of how it all landed together. Izuku smirked. Oh, did you, perhaps, look up the courses in your free time? Is that what they said on the UA official site? Yeah, the courses did say that, but... Izuku tilted his head. Oh, are you upset because I told you to look it up and I was right? You did look more angry than usual today, dash. No, Kaken growled, hands sparking. Izuku wasn't easily convinced, but he shrugged anyway. Okay, then bye. Deku. He turned around, grinning. What was that? Did you want to keep talking with me? Kaken frowned, obviously thinking over his answer. Eventually, he shook his head. No. Izuku shrugged, nodding along to his demand easily. All right. He walked out of the classroom door then, half expecting Kaken to come after him. He sighed to himself, walking out of the school. There's no way Kaken would come after him right then. He wandered around the edge of the city, enjoying the ability to see the ocean from here and smiling as he heard birds sing and waves crash together. He closed his eyes, smiling slightly as he watched the bank account number, feeling satisfied it was doing as well as he wanted it to. Izuku took in a deep breath again, frowning when all he smelled was burning trash. He cracked his eyes open, seeing the infamous trash beach in front of him. He stopped and stared. He wondered. Izuku had an odd transfixation with numbers, specifically counting things, and he couldn't help but wonder exactly how much trash was sitting on this beach, waiting to be taken away and thrown into a designated landfill. Maybe he could do it. He's wanted to get stronger for a while now, and while he was lifting weights, he also enjoyed being able to do things while he exercised. Hell, he could even call this volunteering if he even needed to. Izuku grinned to himself, hopping over the fence and into the sand, walking along the edge and admiring people's ability to pile cars and old scraps on a singular beach. It was impressive, if not concerning, to see. He smirked to himself, rolling up his sleeves and immediately getting to work, happily counting out loud as he did so. Perhaps this is what he could dedicate himself to doing for a while. Might as well see what happens. Naomesa, really, what could you possibly need me for this late at dash? Just, Tsukachi rolled his eyes, hauling Yagi along. Right here, just watch. Yagi squinted, looking out at the trash beach. What am I? Clang. Ha, take that stupid tire. Oof. Ow. Yagi blinked, looking over at his old friend. That's my kid I was telling you about, Midoriya Izuku. Tsukachi finally explained. The one you were having a staring contest with during our first dinner. Yagi nodded, unashamed with his behavior back then, glancing back over in time to see the child climb up a junk pile and leap to the next one, laughing a bit manically as the first one fell down. What is he doing? Cleaning up the trash beach, Tsukachi casually said, smiling. Well, cleaning it up the only way a teenage boy knows how to clean things up. Destroy things? Tsukachi nodded. Looks like it, doesn't it? Yagi chuckled. Sure did look like it. I told you he's got a good heart. Tsukachi spoke softly, smiling over at his pseudo-son. Yagi had to agree. Izuku Midoriya really did seem like a sweet enough kid. But something was missing. Something Yagi needed to be sure that he would pass one for all onto the best candidate. Yes, Midoriya seems to have a strong heart. Yagi finally let himself speak up. He glanced at the boy once again, humming to himself. Perhaps, well, that wouldn't matter. But Midoriya Izuku was someone he'd need to remember. That was for certain. Chapter 6. Not as morally straight as I originally thought. Izuku huffed to himself as he sat at his desk, staring at the scene in front of him. He knew he shouldn't have come to school after fighting with beach trash all week. It was bad luck at this point. Oh, come on, Kaken, really? Izuku couldn't help but whine, staring at the charred mess of a notebook dangling in his hands, taunting him. Kaken grinned and tossed it out the window. I'm just saying, Deku, you need to stay out of my way. There's no way a hero school would accept someone like you. Izuku frowned. Kaken, I'm just going to UA. That doesn't mean I'll be going into the hero course. Ha! Where else would you go? Kaken demanded, hands sparking. Izuku rolled his eyes at the same argument they've been having for the past few months, grabbing his bag and slinging it over his shoulders as he shrugged. Who knows? Maybe I will try out heroics. Just for fun, though. For fun. Yeah. Izuku turned around smirking when Kaken followed him out the classroom door. It's just a job. And, me personally, I don't care for working my life away. Heroics is more than just a job. Kaken challenged him, sounding unsure of himself as they left the school. Izuku hummed, kicking a pebble. It really seems like a job, though. A strenuous one at that. So, you're not up for the challenge? Kaken taunted him, smirking, like he won something. Izuku glanced over at his notebook, the ashes floating in the small koi pond, and kept walking towards the city, so he could go buy a new one, Kaken right by his side. I don't want my job to be a challenge if I'm going to be stuck doing it for the next 40 years. That's stupid reasoning, Kaken huffed. It's stupid to want a job that'll put you out of commission by the time you're 35. Izuku muttered. Ha? What was that, Deku? Kaken taunted. Izuku turned left, taking a shortcut through a park and led them through an underpass. Doesn't matter. You can't just say dash. Boom. The sewer lid popped open right behind them, making Kaken freeze as he heard it. Izuku avoided touching him or urging him anywhere, knowing that the boy would take it as a sign of aggression. Ah, a perfectly decent-sized meat suit. A guy made up completely of sludge seemed pleased as he surveyed the both of them, smiling. Sorry, but I'll need to take over your body for a bit. How much? Izuku asked, resisting the urge to yawn. When the sludge man tilted his head, Izuku sighed. How much money will it take for you to leave us alone? Ha! How much are we talking, kid? The sludge villain asked, turning his full attention to Izuku. He shrugged. How much do you need? Whatever you got. Izuku smirked. How do you feel about 100K? I'll take it. Izuku nodded, shuffling through his numbers, reaching into his backpack. Wah! That's not the right way to deal with villains, Kaken protested. Izuku glared at him. He wants money. I want him to leave me alone. I don't see the big issue here, Kaken. But I don't know about you, Kaken, Izuku sighed, but I have no moral high ground over this guy, so I don't care. But he's a villain. Izuku rolled his eyes. How do you know that for sure? Is there a neon sign bolted to his forehead somewhere I can't see? I am a villain, kid. The sludge villain spoke up. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Just when I think life has gotten simpler, of course this happens. See, I told you. I was right. The sludge guy smirked. You were right, but he's the one who'll be able to keep a secret. Sorry, kid, but I can't have you blabbing to anyone that I'm here. Oh boy, Izuku sighed. What? Izuku tapped his chin. It's probably because of all the yelling, Kaken. The sludge villain nodded. It's a factor. Hey! Izuku shook his head. The sludge villain moved quickly and Kaken had enough time to let off one blast at the guy before he was enveloped in sludge. Eyes squeezed shut as sludge slithered around his mouth, obviously going inside of him. Izuku's heart slowed, eyes locked on Kaken's eyes as the boy opened them. He looked scared for the first time. He looked worried and helpless. He found that he hated his Kaken looking like that. Let him go, Izuku demanded. The slime villain laughed. Frowning, Izuku looked down, seeing a large rock near his foot and picked it up, tossing it a few times. Izuku aimed and threw the rock as hard as he could, sprinting as soon as he did so, not stopping to watch if he hit his mark or not, running closer and closer to Kaken. The slime villain roared, loosening his hold on Kaken. Brats! Izuku dug and dug, pulling Kaken's face out. The boy coughed violently for a few seconds before catching his breath and glaring at Izuku. What are you doing? Izuku huffed. Aim up, genius! Izuku grabbed Kaken's waist, ripping him out of the sludge guy's grip as his friend blew up the guy's face, blinding his other eye and getting smoke in his mouth. Izuku stumbled backwards, running as fast as he could while he carried Kaken, his friend's arms still aimed upwards. Kaken wrapped his legs around Izuku's waist and leaned back, grinning as he shot off precise explosions directly at the sludge villain's face. I am here! Kaken gasped as All Might flew past them and Izuku smirked, moving his palm to the small of his back to pull him closer to his chest and run faster. He could hear All Might zip past him, stumbling as the man created a wave of air that nearly knocked him down. Before the dust had settled and before the rain even touched the sidewalk, Izuku set Kaken down beside him, knowing he had already gotten too close for the boy's comfort. He probably won't be able to look in the boy's direction for the next 10 years because of this. Izuku looked down, smirking when he saw how red Kaken's face was. Worth it. Are you boys all right? All Might boomed, walking over to check on them. Izuku nodded. I'm fine, but Kaken might want to get his lungs checked out or something. That slime was in there. I'm fine, Kaken said hoarsely, coughing up some green slime. All Might made a face and Izuku nodded before turning to face his friend. Toughing out a potential problem inside your lungs probably isn't the smartest way to go about this. Don't call me stupid. I won't call you stupid if you go to the hospital, Izuku pointed out. Besides, I'm sure All Might already called medical services. Might as well have them check you out. All Might coughed awkwardly before whipping out his phone, and Izuku resisted the urge to turn around and hit his head against the wall. Violently. Medical has been notified. All Might smiled, sending them a thumbs up. Izuku glanced over to see Kaken somewhere in between shock and awe. Maybe he should get All Might's signature before the man leaves them? He's positive Kaken would like that. Although the boy has always been picking about what he keeps as sentimental items. Perhaps he should find a poster card for the man to sign? Reasonable. Make sure you two stay safe. All Might grinned, hands on hips. Izuku winced when Kaken looked at All Might like the man was 5 words away from an early retirement. The awe might have worn off a bit too soon. A camera flashed and Izuku flicked his eyes over to them, grimacing when he saw a horde of reporters come towards them, splashing through the rain, overly excited about seeing All Might, probably wanting to spend 20 minutes freaking out over his ability to change the weather from sunny to stormy with one punch. Well, this was fun, Izuku said before slipping away, refusing to get caught up in the press. He didn't want to be there, near so many people and cameras, especially not after that. It was all starting to set in, deep into Izuku's bones, and he wanted to shake the feeling. Kaken was just attacked. That villain had tried to hurt Kaken, right in front of Izuku. He huffed to himself. He may not have a strong desire to be a hero in the same way as All Might like Kaken did, but he so desperately wanted to make sure Kaken stayed safe. He was lucky he had been working out for so long and messing around on that trash beach, or he might not have been strong enough to help Kaken get out in the first place. Izuku nodded, deciding right then and there. He would need to do more. Figure out how to properly fight or something of that nature, for both Kaken and his family. Money wouldn't help them when they were actively dying. Izuku knew that for a fact now. He wanted them to be kept safe, and although he knew they could defend themselves, Izuku also knew he could help. Deku! Kaken growled out, stalking up to him. Izuku smiled. I didn't need your help. I know. Izuku nodded along easily, still smiling. Don't act like you did anything for me, he snarled, his hands sparking off the excess sludge clinging to him. I don't owe you anything. You don't owe me anything, Izuku repeated, speaking it like a promise. Kaken frowned. This doesn't make you a hero either. I know, Kaken. Izuku smiled, gazing happily into Kaken's furious red eyes. He scoffed. Good. The boy stomped away from him, and Izuku mentally thanked the gods for keeping Kaken alive. He turned then, walking back towards his apartment, more than ready to sit in the shower for the next 20 hours or so. Maybe longer. Probably longer. I am being discreet. Izuku blinked, looking up at All Might. He wondered if the man had brain damage from fighting for so long or if he genuinely thought he was being discreet just then. All Might kept grinning at Izuku and he sighed. He was leaning more towards brain damage at this point. Yes, All Might, Izuku asked. Young man, your heroic act inspired me today. Watching you, a child, fight for your friend. All Might's smile got impossibly brighter. That was the heart of a hero acting. Izuku coughed. I know you can become something for the people and, luckily for you, I've been searching for a successor of my own for some time now. So, young man, let me teach you all that I know about heroics. For I'd like you to inherit my power and be a hero for Japan. I'd really rather not, Izuku answered, rocking back on his heels. I mean, sounds cool and all, but… He sucked on his teeth. Me? Becoming the next symbol of peace. Izuku tried not to chuckle, shaking his head. That's just not me. Sorry. Not you? All Might shook the notion out of his head. Don't be silly, my boy. I believe you can do it. Izuku kept his face blank. All Might, listen, you're great and all, but I don't care for Japan the same way you do. You were born to be a hero. No one was born to be something, All Might argued. Izuku shrugged. Agree to disagree then. I was not born to be a hero. But dash. Don't worry about me, All Might. Izuku grinned. I'm very happy doing what I was born to do, which, unfortunately for you, was not to become a hero. All Might stared at him. Why did you help your friend back there? Izuku thought about it, eventually shrugging and grabbing onto the straps of his bag. It's Kaken. He looked worried and I'm not sure. I suppose I just moved. All Might nodded, a small smile on his lips. That's what I thought. Every great hero in history has always had a moment where they can't explain what happened. They simply moved to save someone. No more, no less. Young man, I truly believe you have the heart of a hero. Izuku shook his head. I'm sorry, All Might, but I would only do that for Kaken. I would do anything for Kaken. I am no hero, All Might, but thank you for your confidence in me. All Might looked him over, nodding to himself and stepping back. Well, you know where to find me should you ever change your mind, young one. Izuku nodded, watching closely as All Might disappeared down the alley and walked away from him. Izuku took a shaky breath, gripping his bag straps and kept walking towards the apartment. He knew he was created to simply create money for his mother. His ability to provide for them was something they couldn't throw away because Izuku wanted to throw himself headfirst into danger. He needed to make sure his mother would never be in danger of not being able to afford something. And sure, the idea of becoming something more than just someone rich was exciting enough, but Izuku didn't want to entertain the thought. He simply wanted to get school over with and continue to make money for his mama. And maybe, just maybe, Izuku could have learned to love being a hero the same way All Might did if he took the man's offer just then. Izuku shrugged to himself, trudging back home, ridding himself of his thoughts. Then again, that didn't really matter. Hell, if he ever felt like it, he's sure that he could become his own type of hero once he was done with high school and had made enough money to provide for his family for life. Now that would be interesting. Chapter 7. Let me lay down the foundations. A month later, Izuku walked into the dusty warehouse, frowning at the dust covering the floor. He took off his dark sunglasses, tucking them into his collar as he smiled pleasantly, greeting the sleazy realtor. Hello, sir. The greaseball grinned. Hello, Midoriya, yes. Izuku shook his head. Midorika. Ah, the man looked ashamed. My apologies, Midorika. 64, 111, 232. Izuku smiled, waving his hand as he walked in further. Don't worry about it. So, do you have the inspection results? Of course. The man grabbed a few papers from the table he was standing by, handing them to Izuku. He flipped through them, humming as he did so, like he was actually reading through them. He knew this place was awful and had nearly zero resale value. It was the location he was obsessed with. The warehouse was a tall, long-standing abandoned hunk of cement in the center of Mizudafu, close to Tokyo, UA, the Might Tower, and Endeavor's agency. It was all in all the perfect spot. Izuku handed them back to the man. All right, well, I suppose there's nothing I can do about this now, is there? He chuckled. Is it all right if I hold onto these for a while? I'll be doing my best to rebuild what we have here. Yes, of course. The man smiled. Those are yours along with this file. Simply the copy of the deed and whatnot. And, of course, every key to this place. Izuku nodded. Wonderful. Thank you for your service, sir. I'm happy to help, Midorika. Feel free to call me if you ever need something. Okay? He said. Izuku nodded, looking around the tall warehouse, plans forming and ideas swirling around his mind, not listening to a word the man was saying. Well, I'll check in with you later, the man promised, grabbing his coat. Izuku smiled. Don't be a stranger. I wouldn't dare. The man spoke up as he walked out of the front door, it slamming behind him, kicking up dust and grime. Izuku frowned, twitching his nose and turning back towards the area in front of him. He walked around slowly, greedily taking it all in. There were a few areas for plumbing, which made Izuku happy. Impressively enough, there was an area for an elevator, though it wasn't operational right then. He walked outside, taking pictures around it as he did so. He had found millions of ideas about what color to put on the outside of it, which made him extremely excited. Of course, it'll need to be repainted every 10 years or so, but that's the expense of beauty. He also found a few gardeners in the area who could meet with him and help him figure out the perfect plants to place along the outside of the building. Izuku needed this place to look spectacular. Better than spectacular, actually. He flipped open his phone, dialing the number he had found last night, impatiently tapping his papers on his thigh, waiting for someone to respond. Hello, some girl answered, breathless and a bit confused. Uraraka Family Construction Company. How can we assist you? Izuku smirked. Hello, I was calling to ask if your company did demolition and reconstruction, and if you would consider doing so for me. Let me ask. Izuku nodded and listened to the girl put him on hold. Sorry about that. She laughed awkwardly, still sounding a bit breathless. The answer is yes. We do demolition and reconstruction, though we don't do renovations. Are you able to build the base frames for what I need for renovation? Izuku asked. Yes, though some things may be an upcharge. She sounded apologetic. Izuku waved her off. That's not an issue. Is there a time I could meet with you in person to discuss my plans? I have been given blueprints from the city, though the permit for construction won't come until next week. Of course. Let's meet next Thursday and hopefully that permit will be there so we can start working together. She agreed. Izuku smiled. I look forward to it. Have a nice day. You too, sir. Izuku hung up inside, walking up the stairs, leisurely taking his time to go up the 7 flights of stairs, grinning as he finally reached the roof's access point. He cracked open the door, using a spare brick to keep it cracked as he wandered around, overlooking the city and breathing in the evening air. He glanced around at the area, nodding to himself. He'd build a nice patio area out here just because he could. And besides, he'd like to sit up here occasionally and enjoy the sun without being surrounded by people if he could. Izuku spent the next few weeks in meetings with the construction team, instructing them exactly what he'd like them to do and what he needed done. He didn't give them a time limit since Izuku had 3 years to play around with it before Kaken would even see it. He met the girl who had answered the phone for him, Uraraka Ochako, and came to realize how strong her quirk was and how well suited she was for the line of work her parents were in. It took 2 skipped lunches on her behalf before Izuku began buying lunch for the entire team, every day. He didn't want to single her out for not getting anything to eat, but he needed them to be healthy and nourished. Otherwise, this might become a subpar building once it's done. And that would not be happening under Izuku's watch. He also knew how far they had traveled for him and that they had a terrible system of charging him 1/3 of the price up front, 1/3 during the middle of construction, and the last 1/3 when they had finished. It was stupid in his eyes, so, with a few hours of negotiating, Izuku had nearly doubled what he was paying them and moved them to a weekly paycheck. The difference that made for all 3 of them was startlingly obvious. They had finally gotten rid of their old shoes after a couple weeks. Their clothes changed. Their demeanors changed. Secretly, Izuku thinks he liked watching them be able to take care of themselves. It felt nice to be able to provide for someone other than his mom without intimately doing so. It was refreshing to figure out what sort of power he had with money and what it looked like when he gave it away like this. He had a thing against donating to charities since he's seen one too many stories of their bills ending up in the founders' pockets rather than the cancer patients they were lobbying for. He wondered what he could possibly do with his money, though. Giving it to people he thinks deserve it would be nice, though he feels it would be seen as disrespectful to simply go up and give someone an envelope of cash without the easy explanation of donating. But he couldn't help but wonder what sort of other options he might be able to have. "Hey, Midori!" Izuku turned around, smiling a bit when the youngest Uraraka came bounding over. "Yes. Thanks for the food," she cheered. The whole team loved it. Izuku hummed, mentally remembering to put kebabs on the list for weekly lunches to provide for them. "Good to hear, Uraraka." She nodded. "Yep. Oh, and I was sent over here to tell you that we might have to wait a few weeks to start on the next stage. The city hasn't gotten back to us about the additional permits we need for those new posts going in." Izuku nodded. "Thank you for letting me know, Uraraka." She beamed. "Of course. I've got to get home soon, but I'll see you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow," Izuku promised, pulling out his phone as she left. He had a few permits to speedrun. "You what?" The husband and wife stood in front of him, staring down at the permits and contract Izuku had just thrown on the table, looking utterly dumbfounded with what they had just seen. Izuku grinned. "I got the rest of the permits we needed. Right?" Mr. Uraraka raised his eyebrows, finger pointed on the contract he had just slid over to them, his entire arm trembling a little. Izuku nodded. "And well, yes, if you'd like to. I have a few other houses I want to fix up, and you seem to be the best construction crew to work with." They both blinked at him. "But..." "Trust me?" Izuku waved their worries off with a hand. "The money that's attached to the projects is only fair pay. This is a multi-million yen project, Midoriya." Izuku nodded. "I'm well aware. This number is tens of millions, Midoriya. I did write that number." "So, you're serious?" "If it's in writing and I've already signed the legally binding contract, I would hope I'd be serious about something like this." The Urarakas blinked at him again. Holy shit. Took a few more minutes before they caved, but once they did, there were celebrations all around, with the family buying lunch for him instead of the other way around. Izuku clenched his jaw as he wiped a few tears away, trying hard not to freak them out with the Midoriya tears as he ate and laughed with them. They cleaned up together, and the next following months were complete chaos with so many different teams coming and going, others starting to set themselves up at a few of the houses Izuku had bought while people were figuring out what permits were needed for the last of their projects. After the busy couple months, Izuku stood outside, watching as the cleanup crew was sweeping out his newly designed warehouse, feeling as satisfied as he possibly could right then. He watched as Uraraka came over to stand beside him, dirt caking her jeans and old t-shirt. He squinted at her, trying to make sure he couldn't see any dirt in her hair as she got closer. "So," Uraraka said as she stood next to him and overlooked the warehouse from his angle, stuffing her hands into her pockets and squinting at the sun even with her dark sunglasses on. "What are you thinking of naming this place?" Izuku shrugged. He wondered what he should name this place. "I have absolutely no idea," he confessed, looking towards the building with a tilt of his head. Maybe he should leave the naming up to Kaken, though. After all, it is his future agency building. Chapter 8. Yes, sir. Izuku hummed to himself, nearly skipping his way through the city alleys and making his way towards his favorite ramen place. He had the evening to himself since he figured out, through a bit of light digging, it was an anniversary for Naomasa and his mother. Precious, but he'd rather not be home when they celebrate together. He walked into the ramen shop, making his way around the partitions set up and sitting down, scribbling in his order on the menu before sliding it under the garage, pulling out his phone to play games as he waited. They brought him his order relatively quickly and Izuku dug in, enjoying himself as he did so. Izuku spent his time there, calmly looking around and eating his meal. Eventually, he decided to leave when the owner raised an eyebrow at him, probably wondering why he had spent so much time there. He walked around, looking up and smiling as he saw a few lights in the night sky slowly make their way across. He guessed they were planes, but the idea of aliens checking them out was not lost on him. One of these days he was going to hop onto a plane just so he could see the shining lights of the city pass by him. Ah shit! Izuku turned, his head snapping down to see what was happening around him. There was a man standing there with his face pressed against the alley as he breathed to himself. He obviously had a lizard mutation quirk of some sort, interestingly enough, and Izuku watched as the man sighed to himself before nodding, straightening his shoulders as he did so. "What are you doing?" Izuku asked, eyebrows furrowed. He stepped closer into the alleyway as the man jumped up and spun around, obviously further in his own head than he thought. The guy sighed, his tail curling around him as he did so. "What does it look like, kid?" Izuku hummed, deciding on an answer far from the truth. "You look like you're living your best life." "Right?" The guy rolled his eyes. "Well, I'm busy here, kid, so leave." "With what?" "What do you mean, with what?" "I mean, what are you busy with?" The guy frowned. "Why do you need to know?" Izuku shrugged. "Call me curious." "Curious?" "Well, I would like it if you called me Deku, but I suppose curious would serve its purpose either way." Izuku explained. "What's your name?" The man eyed him warily. "Call me Spinner." "Interesting name." "So is yours." Izuku nodded. "That it is." He smiled then. "So, what were you doing? What does it matter?" Izuku shrugged. "Just curious. I have money if that's what you need." Spinner blinked, wide-eyed. "I could be a villain and yet you tell me you have money on you?" Spinner shook his head. "You offered me money?" "Yes." Izuku blinked. "Was I not supposed to?" "Just, bad people could take advantage of you for that kind of stuff, kid. Be careful with who you decide to offer that to." Izuku smiled. "I promise I'm relatively safe. And besides, you don't seem the type to steal." "To use someone," Izuku clarified. Spinner nodded. "Ah, does that mean you think I've stolen?" "I think the fact that you called yourself a villain shouldn't be overlooked." "Do I look like a villain?" Izuku shrugged. "You look like whoever you've defined yourself as." "What if I told you I was a thief?" Spinner questioned. "Then I would say that's different than being a villain." "Villain, thief, those titles mean the same thing these days." Spinner spoke sadly. "Ah, and why do you need to be a villain to do that?" "Do what?" "Get money. Do that sort of stuff." Spinner scoffed. "No one likes to hire people that look like me." "Really?" Izuku looked him up and down. "What can you do?" "Huh. What are your skills?" "Welding, moving, retail, customer service." Spinner looked taken back. I'm not sure. I went to medical school for a few years before dropping out. And while I was in school, I had a job with a moving company." "Great!" Izuku cheered before handing over his business card. "Call me sometime this week and I'll have a few job interviews set up for you. All right?" "Ah. Awesome. Good talk, Spinner." Izuku gave him a thumbs up as he quickly moved out of the alley. "I'll see you soon enough." "Ah." Izuku turned the corner, pulling out his phone and dialing his friends as he brought it up to his ear. There was a click on the other end. "Uraraka's construction. How can I help you?" "How's it going, Uraraka?" Izuku smiled. Izuku listened to Uraraka huff a laugh over the phone. "You got another one already?" Izuku hummed. "Maybe." "Well, consider us interested. I'll make sure to tell everyone to get ready." Izuku nodded. I'll send you the details tonight. Thanks, Midori. I'll talk to you later then. You know it. Great. See ya. Bye-bye. Izuku hung up and sighed to himself. After he met up with the Urarakas and construction began their jobs, things started looking up. In a few short months, everything was completed and Izuku was leading Spinner into his newest project. During those months, Izuku had asked Spinner to stay in one of the houses he had bought in the city as he looked around for a respectable job for the man. The complex the Urarakas were fixing up was going to be a bit different than Spinner was used to, but Izuku thinks the man could use the friends living in a complex will provide. He used the newly constructed space as an apartment complex and the only payment he would ask for is for them to call him the wrong name. That's it. It seemed like a nice enough deal, as long as the people he approved to live in his complex followed his basic rules of acting as a good citizen while living in the complex and doing their best to avoid having police have a reason to come by. He had mentioned a few common-sense rules in their lease contracts, but Izuku didn't pay too much attention to it since he figured those wouldn't be hard for anyone to follow. The problem came when he realized his clients didn't pay too much attention to what he wrote out and tried to live by their own rules instead. It had only been a couple months since half of his apartments were full and quickly being filled as word got out. Some guy had moved in across from Magna, one of Izuku's favorites, and he had been causing disturbances since the moment he arrived. That's why Magna was standing before him in his small office, wringing her hands as she went into detail about how the creep tried to sneak 2 different cameras into her room. He what? She swallowed, her head hung a bit low. I apologize for inconveniencing you. No. Izuku interrupted her, shaking his head, trying to calm down. Nope, I'm not inconvenienced in any way. Do you know his name? My neighbors? Matt Heath, I believe is his name. Magna confessed. Izuku smiled, nodding towards her as he stood. Great, thank you for telling me. He reached into his drawer, confused when he pulled out a saucepan but made for the stairs anyways. He had already given Matt Heath an eviction notice and knew for a fact the man was staying beyond what his contract stipulated. On top of that, he was acting like a creep to one of the renters Izuku actually enjoyed talking to, which meant he might get hit with a saucepan if he wasn't careful with his answers. He stormed up the stairs, knocking on the man's door harshly when he found the right room number. There was a grumble and a stumble, but eventually a light flicked on and Matt opened the door, groggy with sleep as he did so. Izuku smiled. Hello, Matt. I'm here to kick you out. Huh. The guy looked confused, rubbing at his eyes as he looked down. What? Izuku nodded. You're no longer welcome here. I will be kicking you out legally, should you try to stay any longer. Wah, but you said I could stay here. I signed a contract and everything. Izuku nodded, flipping the saucepan in his hand. I am well aware. I am also aware of how you've taken advantage of my kindness to let you stay here. You think you can threaten me, little boy? He moved closer, using his height and broadness to intimidate him. Izuku swung, doing his best to not grin as the man's knee cracked and he fell down. You have 2 days to get out of here and find a new spot to rent. I will know if you try to come back here, and if you try to bother anyone ever again, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life locked up in Tartarus. Matt grinned. You're the one afraid of the police coming around, aren't you? Izuku swung again, knocking the man out cold as the saucepan connected with him. He glared down at the guy, beyond annoyed at the insinuation that he was scared of the police force. Merlin, remind me not to get on his bad side. Izuku huffed, brushing off his hoodie and grabbed his saucepan before turning around, grinning tiredly at the small crowd of people staring at him. Well, I hope everyone understands how serious I was about my rules I said before. Sorry for the noise. And, good night. Kid's got some balls on him. Jiho chuckled, turning around and going back into his apartment, laughing louder as the door shut. Izuku bowed his head as he moved away, ready to leave the spotlight Jiho had put on him. He'll need to remember to get the guy back one of these days. He was a foreigner here on business and was only renting the room for a few months before he went back to Korea and occasionally brought Izuku some chocolates. Izuku sighed as the whispers started up again. All right, good night, everyone. He walked away, with Magna smiling at him and Spinner jogging up to him, rubbing sleep out of his eyes. Hey, mini-boss. I'm not a mini-boss. Sure you are. Spinner grinned. A tiny landlord. Do you want to get hit with the saucepan too? Spinner put his hands up teasingly. Of course not, Deku. I would hate for that to happen. 62, 334, 988. Izuku grinned. Good. Do you know how late it is? Spinner asked. Izuku shook his head. No, but I'll be fine. I just needed to take care of that for Magna real quick, and then I'll get a nap or something. You know? Spinner tapped his chin as they walked together, pretending to think hard about something. You have a habit of hoarding people you like. Did you know that? Izuku huffed. No. And no, I don't. You don't sound convinced. Spinner sighed. Just come on, kid. It's late. It's not that bad. It's 2 in the morning on a Wednesday. Spinner said softly. Are you sure you don't want to spend the night? I've got an extra mat. Oh dear Jesus, it's a school night. Isn't it? Izuku whined. I'm gonna fall flat on my face tomorrow morning. So. Izuku huffed. Show me where to sleep. Sure thing, kid. Izuku stumbled into the classroom, grabbing his homework packet out of his bag before putting it on his teacher's desk and heading to his seat. He grunted his hello to Kaken before falling into his desk, humming happily as he relaxed in his seat. Izuku blinked, annoyed when the teacher started talking and class officially began. He grabbed his notebook, doodling in the margins as his eyes stayed half open as he rested his chin in his hand and pretended to hear a word of what his teacher was saying. He thought to himself, allowing himself to mutter under his breath as he looked down, wondering what he should do next. Fixing up the spot for Spinner and those other guys had been fun and felt nice, but Izuku knew for a fact he could do more. There was something out there that Izuku could do better, he just couldn't think of it right then. Shut up, Kaken murmured harshly. Yes, sir, Izuku answered back without a thought. Kaken whirled around. What? Izuku blinked, his eyes finally opening as he feigned confusion, trying not to freak out. What? What did you just say? Izuku frowned. Why are we still talking? Oh, did you want to listen to my thoughts on... Never mind. Kaken glared at him, slowly turning back to face the front of the classroom once again. Izuku let out a breath of relief. He honestly had no explanation for why he even said something like that to his friend. That was so odd. Maybe he subconsciously meant to mock him for being so uptight about Izuku's mutterings? Very plausible, and a better explanation than none. Izuku nodded to himself. Yeah, that made sense. He should probably get to sleep soon before he spoke up again, though. He's not sure he could explain away something else happening today. God, he really needed to get to bed before anything else happened. Chapter 9. Trash can on fire, the perfume. Izuku stepped out of the water, using his own shirt to wipe the sweat and ocean water off of him. The beach was looking much better than he thought it'd look. It looked good enough for him to wash off as much sweat off of him as he could in the ocean nearby before going home for a thorough scrubbing down. He walked around, pacing the beach for a few moments as he dried off more before throwing a sweatshirt on and slipping back into his sand-filled sandals. It wasn't too dark out, though most people seemed to have gone home already. Izuku couldn't wait to be one of those people, showered and passed out on his own bed. He might even miss school just so he could keep sleeping for the whole day tomorrow. That sounded so nice. Izuku turned down an alley, taking a few shortcuts to get home before he stopped, looking at the zombie-like man standing there, his back turned to Izuku as he dug through a trash bag. Izuku wrinkled his nose, wondering if the man in front of him was reeking or if it was something else. gods, he hoped it was something else. Hello? The man whipped around, scowling at him. What do you want? For you to take a shower, Izuku bluntly said, smiling after a few seconds. No, really. Well, that's not the priority. I want you to stop digging through dumpsters. Wah. Shut up if you don't get it, kid. Izuku shrugged. Yeah, I don't get it, but I do have money. You know, the thing that can fix your problems. Money can't fix everything. The man scowled at him. Izuku smiled. I agree. It depends on what the money's used for. Now, would you like me to get you food that doesn't smell like rotting flesh? Or is that you? The guy lit his finger on fire. Did you want to say that again? I don't think you want me to say it again. Good observation. I try. Izuku scuffed his shoe against the ground. Well, if you'd like, I know a place, free of course, where you can eat, wash up, and crash for a while. A while? Yes, a while. How long is a while? An unspecified amount of time. The guy scoffed. An unspecified amount of time? You know, if you keep repeating what I say, I might have to call you Parrot Perry. Izuku answered, looking the guy up and down. Call me Midori. Green. It works. The guy nodded. Call me Dabi. Izuku raised an eye. Cremation. It works. He nodded, staring at the weird homeless dude in front of him. Izuku then shrugged and started walking. Well, come on. I'd rather get you settled down for the night before I get frostbite from bathing in the ocean. It's not supposed to get cold tonight, Dimbat. I could be sensitive, you know? Izuku pointed out. I might have some skin mutation that makes me get cold super fast and gives me hypothermia as soon as it dips below 0 degrees. It'll get down to 10 degrees tonight, and that's the maximum. Izuku pretended to shiver. Oh, I feel the chill starting to set already. You're the most dramatic person I've ever met. Why, thank you. That was far from a compliment, kid. Izuku kept walking, smirking to himself when he realized Dabi was still following him. He turned the corner, beelining for the east loop that was quite a few blocks from here. He had developed a bit of a hobby while he worked on Kaken's future agency. It included buying houses, fixing them to his liking, and then adding on things that add an astronomical amount of money to the land the houses were built on. Of course, Izuku tends to keep the houses rather than reselling, mostly because it was an easy way to keep his name relevant and therefore spoken about, which earned him more money in the long run. He was also wary with who he brought over to the apartment complex nowadays, ever since the incident that had happened with Matt Heath. He refused to let anyone move in without seeing how they lived in one of his houses first, along with being subjected to an intensive background check, courtesy of the program Naomesa keeps on his laptop. All of that being said, Izuku decided to bring Dabi to one of his houses to see how the man would fare and to get him off the streets. Well, one of his uglier houses. It has running water. So, Dabi started. Are you planning on telling me why you have an extra house to spare? Izuku waved his hand. Please, you're not special. I have many different houses. A man gets bored. Dabi snorted. A man? Mocking the one who's giving you a house? Not mocking, simply making a statement. A statement. I called you a man. Dabi defended himself. Do you want to be called something else? I'm fine with man. Okay then. Okay. Fine. They walked in silence for a bit before Izuku sucked on his teeth and turned a corner, feeling more than awkward with having the rotting flesh walking silently behind him. Izuku sniffed. I have a hobby. A hobby? I enjoy fixing up houses. And this is one you fixed? Eh? Izuku shrugged. Eh? I like to keep them. Keep the houses? Occasionally. Your hobby is buying houses, fixing them up and keeping them? Dabi asked, sounding a bit incredulous. Izuku shrugged. It's a better hobby than dumpster diving. You're an asshole. I know. Self-aware. You've got one thing going for you. Izuku smirked. Hate me all you want. You're still following me. Whatever. Dabi scowled. He turned, walking out to the black gate and unlatching it, leaving it open for Dabi as he walked up the stone path. The outside of the house was pretty enough, with a modern sort of charm and cherry wood trim showing itself off. He dramatically lifted up the welcome mat, gasping at the key and picking it up to use for the front door. It finally opened and Izuku shoved his shoes off before stepping aside, watching as Dabi did the same and looked around, a bit surprised. Perhaps the guy didn't think Izuku would actually bring him to a house? How odd. My only rule is no messing up the house and no murdering people here. Izuku spoke, walking through the living room. Other than that, you're free as a bird. Mess up and I will make this house feel like a cage. Bathroom is down the hall and to the left. Bedroom is straight across, living room, kitchen, you get the gist. Izuku tossed the man the spare key, smiling at him. I'll see you later. Later. The man had enough presence of mind to ask. Izuku nodded. I get bored, so I might swing by sometimes to say hello or whatever. What else? Oh, I'll take care of groceries and whatnot. It'll just be delivered to the door and… Do you know who I am? Dabi asked. Izuku blinked. I'm also stingy with drugs, Dabi, so if you're on any… No, idiot. I mean… Dabi sucked in a breath, looking around. You… don't know my civilian name? Why would I? Izuku blinked, trying to understand the guy in front of him. He held up a hand when Dabi went to speak. I gotta tell ya, I don't care who you are. Just don't bring the police around. Use common sense. Take multiple showers a day. Brush your teeth and do your absolute best to avoid trashing the place. Does that make sense? Yeah, but… Great. Izuku cut him off. Then I won't go snooping around your life and you can live in a house and not the streets. My number is on the card taped to the fridge if you ever want to text me what you like to eat, what kind of soap you want for the bathroom, stuff like that. Dabi frowned, but nodded hesitantly. Kid, I've gone through my life without owing anything to anyone. And you'll continue to do so, Izuku confirmed. They both stood there, staring at each other before Dabi glanced away and nodded. Izuku smiled, waving at him as he stepped into his shoes and opened the door. Awesome. Then I'll see you later. Remember to text me what you want sometime soon. I will buy stuff even if you don't tell me what you like. He stepped through the door, shutting it and sighing, walking back towards his own apartment. He walked along the sidewalk, content with his night when two men stumbled out of a bar in front of him, laughing and leaning on each other, nodding along to whatever had been said before they burst onto the street. Oh, I swear, my buddy promises it's true. The little twerp made him call him Deku for some reason. Sh, why do you reckon he did that? The other guy asked, a stupid grin on his face. The other guy shrugged. No idea. Probably an easy tactic to knock those idiots off balance so he could get them off the street faster. They all say he's a little kid. Grinning guy hummed. Now that's a real hero he is. Yeah, it's been nice having one around this area. Izuku frowned, more than confused about what the men were talking about. Him? Running around being a hero? I heard no one's really seen the taunter out anymore though, one guy said with a frown. He hasn't decided to quit, has he? I don't want that. That would suck. Izuku walked quicker, not wasting any more of his time eavesdropping on their conversation. He didn't realize how many people knew about his vigilante escapades. He had no idea some people enjoyed his presence as an idiot kid who insulted villains and occasionally knocked them out. He slipped in the house, darting into his room to grab clothes and take a nice long shower. Izuku stood in the shower, the water raining down on him as he frowned. Sure, he was helping people, what with putting Dabi in an actual home to the petty villains he got off the streets simply because they wouldn't insult him, but none of that actually constituted as anything heroic. Right? Chapter 10. Extending Loyalty and Manipulating Foes. Summary. Izuku follows Bakugo into UA and makes a friend. Chapter text. Izuku walked out of the gates of UA wholly unimpressed. Oh sure, the sheer size of the land was enough to make anyone stop and stare, but Izuku wasn't going to marvel at the school itself. There were so many questions he had about the main building itself that he couldn't actually figure out how to like it. First of all, why was it in the shape of an H? Its initials are U and A. No H. It makes no sense to him. On top of that, there are so many windows. The entire outside seemed to be built of glass, and it made no practical sense to Izuku. Design-wise, it looked fine, but it could be more. The land, on the other hand, was impressive. Something Izuku would have spent hours and hours looking around if he wasn't paranoid that the principal would pop out of the bushes somewhere. His time spent in the examination room nearly made him scream with the 4 different types of whites painted on one wall, which made him simultaneously confused and annoyed. He did his best avoiding doing so and instead angrily wrote about the reason why he'd be able to create a better hero grading system with his hands bound and head shoved into the sand than the HPSC had done. Izuku thinks he did well. He knows he did well. The problem is, he has no idea if he did well enough to land in the best management class that he could. He wanted to. It was an odd feeling. To have this much passion flowing through him when he honestly didn't think he cared about getting into UA. Izuku thought maybe he was nervous about not being accepted and never being able to contact Kaken again. But then again, he'll see Kaken for birthdays and family holidays every year, so even if he doesn't get in, he'll still see him. No, Izuku thinks he might actually be interested in being able to learn from UA. He's interested in learning from their management course because he wants to. Izuku was well aware that he was selfish, but he never thought he'd grow selfish over his schooling choices. He had always told himself he'd be fine. As long as people said his name wrong and continued to make him money, he would be a good son and provide for his family. He's proud of his ability so far. He's been able to keep his promise of taking care of everything his mother might need. And now that she has Naomesa, there wasn't anything missing from her life. Izuku was happy to be selfish if it meant taking care of people he cared about. Even with the apartment complex and the houses he was renting out, he was still selfish enough to give them the wrong name and make them call him that. He still acted as their landlord and disturbed their lives. He was selfish enough to bring them into his life, and Izuku didn't care. It was just so odd to figure out how he was growing selfish over something as meaningless as school. Izuku had never needed to be passionate at school. Growing up with Kaken and sitting behind him, it was hard not to get involved though. There was a silent thing he had with Kaken, where they would try their hardest and study and see who got the better score. It was exciting to pour his all into something as bland as a worksheet, especially when he was rewarded with attention from Kaken. He slipped inside his house and spent the rest of the day up there, not speaking to anyone. Izuku simply didn't understand why he wanted this as much as he did, and that freaked him out. He was not easily shaken. He couldn't be when he was stupid enough to spend his nights coaxing criminals to call him the wrong name and ran an apartment complex full of homeless people who were often desperate for more. But now, Izuku was freaking out. He had spent his life providing for his mother and those he considered family, but what he wanted to do was taking selfish to a whole new level. Sure, most kids had passions and things they looked forward to, but Izuku never allowed himself to indulge in those sorts of things. He knew his purpose, to make money and provide, and he's gotten good at doing so. In fact, he's gotten so good that he didn't need to think about his future career at all because that was unnecessary. And yet, Izuku might have found a passion. He nearly enjoyed the sorts of subjects he saw on the entrance exam today. He remembers the fever he used to write in his essay, frustration flowing through his veins when he hadn't had enough time to finish his conclusion. Izuku wondered why this was happening now. He wondered what he might do about this. He knew, subconsciously, that he'd choose to go to UA if given the choice. He was well aware of what awaited him if he went there and found himself yearning for the chance to learn more. Izuku blinked, looking at the clock. His mother was going to be home soon. She had always supported him through his odd endeavors and silly whims. She was the one who had suggested getting into UA in the first place, telling him to focus on his schooling and less on the money-making. He wondered. It took nearly a week for Izuku to stop running into walls, too lost in his own head as he tried to figure out why he was so nervous for this and what he was going to do about schooling if UA didn't pan out, and then freaking out because he needed UA to work out. Obviously, the inside of Izuku's brain was scrambled. He felt frantic and ended up visiting Magna and playing mahjong with her all night to calm his nerves. There was a tension in the air when Izuku had gotten back home in the morning and he stepped through the door, looking apprehensively at his mother as she presented him with a letter. He sucked in a breath. "Is that?" She nodded. "It's from UA. Came this morning. I was gonna call you." "Ah." "Well?" She smiled, nudging the letter into his hands. "Open it." Right. Izuku chuckled, shaking his shoulders out as he quickly ripped the thing open and was met with many different forms and letters and whatnot. Izuku looked at the letter, reading through it at lightning speed, a grin slowly overtaking his frown. "Well." Izuku turned to his mother. "We got in." "You got in," she cheered, grabbing onto his biceps and jumping. "Ah, okay. Katsudan tonight." He hugged his mother, taking a big breath. "Thanks, Mama." "Of course, sweetie," she whispered, kissing his head before pulling back and moving towards the kitchen. "Now, pick out a movie for us tonight. We've got to celebrate." Izuku grinned. "You got it, Ma." He went into the living room, standing in front of the TV and flipping through the options with the remote. The door opened and Izuku heard Naomasa call out to his mother. "Honey, in here." "Hi, sweetie." "Oh." Izuku snorted at the man. What's going on?" "Oh, nothing much." Inko smirked, swirling her spoon in her tea. "We just found out that Izuku got into UA." What? Naomasa turned around, a huge grin growing. "Bud, that's amazing. Well done, kiddo." "Thanks now." Izuku grinned. The following weeks were chaotic. Izuku was figuring out what he needed to apply for, when he needed to grab his uniforms and so many registration forms to fill out. He was frantic on his way out the door, hoping he wouldn't be too late for his first day at UA since he had a few errands to run. And, well, if he timed it perfectly, then Izuku had a few people to speak with before school started as well. Networking and all that. He walked up to the school, an iced tea in hand, and paused for a moment when he finally found his target. Bright yellow eyes, pink dreadlocks, odd pieces of something in her hands, and a soot line lining the area that her goggles sat around her eyes. Izuku stared at her. She stared back. "You interested?" She raised an eyebrow before holding up her boots. "You interested in my baby?" Izuku glanced at the boots before looking at her, internally shrugging as he walked closer. "I think I might be. What's your name?" "Hatsum May, future CEO of Hatsum Incorporations," she said, hand on hip. Izuku nodded. He already knew that, but proper introductions never hurt anyone. "Call me Midoriya Izuku. How long have you been inventing?" "I'm not sure. My pap says I came out with a wrench." She shrugged. Izuku grinned. "What place did you come in for exams?" She puffed her chest out a bit, looking proud. "I was the top scorer." "Why do you ask?" "I wanted to know who I'd be investing in, that's all." Izuku said plainly. "If you're interested, I have a few projects I can pay you handsomely for, as well as fund any of your projects that your sensei might deny." She raised an eyebrow. "You have enough to invest in me?" "I have enough to invest in your entire future company," Izuku promised. Again, if you're interested, I'd like to see what we can work out. He pulled out his notebook, handing it to her. That's full of everything I need modified for someone in the heroics class. Can you do it? She scoffed. Then meet me for lunch and we can talk about the details. Izuku decided. She nodded. You got it, Midori. Nice meeting you, Hatsum, Izuku said, smiling a bit as she waved her hand at him and walked over, nose buried deep into his notebook. Hopefully he'd see her and the notebook again at lunch. Deku. Izuku turned around, a bright grin in place. Kaken. What the hell are you doing here? He asked, looking incredulous. Izuku snorted, walking up to him. I'm here to go to class, silly. You actually got into UA? Izuku rolled his eyes. What? Like it's hard. Wah? Kaken glared at him, hands flexing. You didn't actually follow me into UA, right? Izuku shrugged. Well, I'm in UA, and you're in UA. So, it seems like a happy coincidence to me. I'm far from happy. You usually are. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? Izuku smirked, walking alongside Kaken. It just means I think you could afford to smile more or something. You've got great teeth. Don't talk about my teeth, Kaken frowned. You don't like your teeth? I don't like talking about my teeth with you. You would talk about your teeth with someone other than me? Izuku pretended to be taken back. Kaken huffed. I'm not interested in talking about my teeth to anyone who isn't a dentist. So if I became a dentist... Just shut up, Deku. Kaken rolled his eyes as he stuffed his hands into his pockets. After a few seconds of silence, Kaken sighed. What class are you in? I thought you told me to shut up. I did. Now I want to know which class you weaseled your way into. Izuku smiled. I'm in class 1G management. Kaken wrinkled his nose. Management? Yep, he cheered. Hopefully I get an exciting teacher, but, well, all of them are exciting. Did you want me to get you any autographs from the heroes? Kaken scoffed. Of course not, nerd. I'm not going to ask for my teacher's autographs. You could ask while they're in costume. Then they're technically heroes before teachers, right? Just shut up, Deku. 64, 221, 311. Izuku beamed. I'll do my best. Have fun in class, Kaken. He turned and walked the other way, in a bit of a hurry since the heroics classes were on the first floor and management was right above them on the second floor. He darted into his classroom, quickly taking a seat behind a guy with purple hair that seemed to stand straight up. Izuku huffed, a bit annoyed he'd be peering around this guy to see the board, but settled quickly when the bell rang and Midnight herself strutted through the door. Welcome to Class 1G, Midnight grinned, looking a bit too hungry as she took them all in. Izuku loved it. Let's start with introductions, shall we? She called out, walking up to the teacher's podium. Izuku zoned out for most of the day, only blinking back to himself when he was in the auditorium, squished between the purple-haired boy and the French kid, and unable to find Kaken and his entire class. Izuku frowned, but decided against saying anything. He'd find them soon enough, he supposed. At least Kaken had the decency to make it obvious which hero class he had made it into. Izuku spoke with Mei after school, and after a few hours, loads of milk tea, and a concerning amount of soot, Izuku and Mei finally signed an agreement. He looked forward to his future partner and seeing what she could make, though he had to cut their meeting short because of the text he had gotten during it. What do you want in return? He had been told by a few people in the apartment complex that they were close to Overhaul's territory. After a few phone calls and snooping through Neomesa's files, he finally figured out who they were and why they were feared. Overhaul took over a family yakuza approximately 4 years ago, and most of the elders in the group didn't appreciate him or his fanatic ideals, which he tended to scream wherever he could. It took Izuku around half an hour to figure out what Overhaul thought of quirks, and even less time to swipe a phone number off of his laptop. Izuku had been testing the man, but when the picture came through showing off exactly who was behind the study's overhaul had been doing, Izuku wanted to move his plan into motion as fast as he possibly could. The picture of the young girl in a tattered nightgown made him want to scream, though Izuku had opted for the second option. He smirked to himself as he typed back. Just bring me the girl and you'll have it all. Lincoln Park. 5 minutes. I see you then. Izuku ran, not wanting to miss his chance. He ran through the gates of the park and to the bench he had been promised she'd be dropped off at. His heart pounding when he rounded the corner and didn't see them. He breathed out, happy when he watched some guy in a bird mask walk, Eri trailing along unhappily behind him. Izuku walked over and approached them, nearly flinching when the man snapped his fingers and Eri ran over to the bench and sat down. Izuku wanted to murder this man. Do you have my money? The guy gruffly asked. It's been deposited into your bank account already, Izuku promised, nearly waving the man away as he stared at her. The guy huffed. Fine. He looked over and seemed to roll his eyes. I don't know what's so special about that kid to you. She's basically a walking curse. Izuku did nothing more than hum an acknowledgement towards him, letting the man leave without another word as he continued to look at the girl. He walked around the bench slowly, watching as her hands trembled and eyes darted around the scenery. He swallowed, sitting down and facing forward, trying to alleviate some of her stress. I'm Izuku, he finally said, looking forward. They told me your name was Eri. She nodded, fists clenching her dress. MMHM. Izuku hummed. I was told that the bird men were bad people. Eri nearly nodded before she shrugged, feigning indifference. Izuku hummed again. I think they're terrible people. She gasped. What? I think they're terrible people. Izuku repeated, like a promise, and looked her way. I want to help you get far away from them, Eri, but only if you'll let me. She stared at him for a few moments before standing and brushing off the front of her dress. I'll let you. Izuku smiled softly. Wonderful. Come on. Izuku coaxed her, opening the front door. It's all right, I promise. The bird men aren't going to be around for much longer. Her eyes twinkled. Really? Izuku, his mother called out, walking out of the kitchen. She gasped, her eyes sliding down to meet Eri. Well, hello there. Hi. Who's there? Naomasa called out, rounding the corner. His jaw dropped as he looked at the both of them. Guys, this is Eri. Izuku turned around, smiling at her gently as he softened his voice. Eri, this is my mama and papa. Her name is Inko and his is Now. She nodded, ducking her head down slightly from the attention. He turned back towards them with an innocent smile. Wah! Kid! Izuku turned around and smiled warmly at her. Eri Midoriya. That has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? She nodded back quickly. It sounds pretty. Naomasa choked and Izuku's smile got brighter when he heard his mother elbow the man. Good. I'm glad. She ducked her head, red tinging her cheeks. I'm glad too. Izuku smiled wider. It looked like he had gotten a new addition to the family. Chapter 11. Do not touch what you cannot have. Summary. Izuku learns how to work with others. Izuku is also very possessive. Chapter text. All right, get going, kid. Naomasa smiled, ruffling Izuku's hair as he held Eri with an arm. And remember what we talked about. Izuku nodded, smiling at Eri. Goodbye, Eri. I'll be back soon. She leaned towards him, still clinging onto Naomasa, and spoke softly. Goodbye, Izuku. He waved them goodbye and rolled his eyes as Naomasa gave him a look as he walked out the door. He understood bringing Eri home was a bit unexpected, but they had the means to provide for her and she didn't need to be living with the Yakuza in the first place. Of course, the new rules for Izuku as he left the house were a bit amusing. On top of being banned from acting as a vigilante and banned from visiting hero merch stores without a supervisor. Now he wasn't allowed to adopt any more kids into the family. He huffed to himself as he walked up to the gates of UA and slipped in with the crowd. His family had some ridiculous expectations if they thought he wouldn't adopt a kid on the street again. Izuku slipped into his chair and dropped his bag in front of him, looking questioningly at the head of purple hair standing tall in front of his face. He could not see the whiteboard like this, so he inched his desk over a few paces and sat back, relaxing in his new spot. The guy turned around to give him the stink eye, but Izuku couldn't care. He could finally see the whiteboard and wouldn't be questioning the lesson today. Maybe he should have gone into heroics. At least then he could have had Kaken seated in front of him the whole time. That would have been so nice. "Welcome, children," Midnight called out as she grinned, strutting through the doors. The projection turned on and Midnight took off her coat, shuffling around a few papers as she got ready for the day. The final bell rang and she finally acknowledged them. "All right, kiddos. Today we're doing algebraic expressions. Nothing too hard, but it requires some practice to get it down. Don't slack off. This information will be on your finals." "Gross," the guy in front of him muttered. Izuku tuned the rest of her speech out until she switched the projection and the words partners were lit up. He nearly screamed when he figured out what was happening. "And our last group, Shinso, Midoriya, and Aoyama," Midnight announced. "I'll give you a few minutes to introduce yourselves while I pass out the packets we'll be working on." "Shinso," the guy in front of him said as he turned around, his head hanging and his purple eyes looking ready to be rolled. Izuku blinked. "Shinso. My name," he clarified. Izuku hummed as he turned to the other guy right next to him. "Ah, all right, well, what about you?" "Aoyama Yuga, Messers." He smiled, a sparkle appearing from nowhere. Izuku was impressed. "Nice to meet you both. I'm Midora Izuku." He introduced himself. "Midnight calls you Midoriya, though." Izuku waved Shinso off. "She's wrong." He flipped open his packet, eye twitching when he realized he'd be dealing with math today. Nothing awful, but he hated working on math in groups. "Our teacher is wrong?" Aoyama asked, confused. Izuku shrugged. Doesn't matter. So, how are you boys at algebra?" "Not entirely awful," Shinso answered. Aoyama looked ashamed. "I'm afraid I say pas terrible, mon ami." Izuku nodded grimly. "Ah, I see. You understood that," Shinso said like he meant it to be a question. Izuku shrugged, looking back at his packet. "I know when someone isn't the oh how fantastic, over the moon, jumping for joy kind of guy when I say the word math." "Good point." "Thank you." "All right, class," Midnight called up. All three boys breathed out a sigh of relief. "You have the rest of the period to work together. Anything you don't get done in class, take home and bring in your finished work tomorrow. Get started." "Prendre la tête," Aoyama muttered under his breath, flipping the page of his packet. Izuku thinks he understood the sentiment. "We should divide up the work," Shinso said. "Just have each of us work on a different section and we'll get done faster." Izuku nodded. "That works for me." "Me as well," Aoyama spoke up, still looking forlorn about whatever he had seen inside the packet. They worked well enough together and Izuku wasn't constantly looking over at them in disappointment. Shinso actually seemed to be pretty competent when it came to algebra and Aoyama learned from his mistakes quickly. Halfway through the class was when things got weird. "Staff, code blue in the USJ. I need all available personnel to get there immediately." Nedzu's voice rang over the intercoms and they all watched as Midnight sprang into action. "Midoriya, you're in charge," Midnight said before running out of the room, the door clicking locked behind her. He stared at the door, confused about what was happening. His peers turned to him. "Oh boy." Izuku looked at Shinso before whispering. "Why me?" He raised an eyebrow. Your VP and class press isn't here today. Ah, Izuku nodded. Right, I knew that. Oh my god, Shinso groaned. Izuku rolled his eyes. You know the manic one around here, right? Aoyama asked, pointing at him with his pencil. May something? Ask her what's going on. She'll know. Izuku blinked. Would she know? Aoyama nodded. Alice, Pren's ton courage adu mains she'll know. Izuku blinked again before nodding, hoping that was some sort of encouragement, or something. Who really knows? He went to check his phone, smiling a bit when he got texts from May as soon as he did. But then he read them. USJ is under attack. Probably villains. I think my test sub from 1A are in there. Izuku took a deep breath, trying not to get too angry at the moment, because, from what it sounded like, someone had attacked Class 1A. Someone had attacked Kaken. Izuku waited as patiently as he possibly could for the next few days. UA had given everyone the weekend to recover, and while some might have been at home comforting their families, Izuku locked himself inside Kaken's agency, sat on the couch and stared at the clock situated on the wall, waiting for Father Time to do his job and get him back to school. His mother didn't hesitate at all when Monday finally came around, simply sending him off with a kiss and a promise to give Kaken the spicy brownies she had made for him. In her words, chocolate will heal the wounds of the soul, which, of course, meant she made 4 dozen and decided she would give some to the Bakugas. He didn't have any serious plans to talk to the boy, but rather spend his time looking after him from afar. Kaken seemed to stress too much when Izuku was around, and he refused to contribute to Kaken aggravating any potential injuries he had gotten during the attack. He got to the school, moving towards the hero department. He slipped inside the classroom, the pan of brownies in hand, and took a second to look at the students in here. They were loud, for one. Many of them were scattered around, talking over each other and grouped off in specific corners. It was odd to see. Midoriya. Izuku turned around, seeing Uraraka and Ida in the doorway. He smiled. Hey, Uraraka. It's nice to see you. It's great to see you too. But, what are you doing here? Izuku walked towards the teacher's desk and placed the brownies on the corner as he took a sticky note, writing, for Bakugu, on it before responding to her. Just dropping something off. That's all. Whoa, you're Midoriya, Kaminari shouted, bounding up to him. It's nice to meet you. I'm Kaminari. Izuku smiled, full of amusement. He knew exactly who they were. He made it a point to know everyone who shared a class with Kaken, even in middle school. He supposed old habits really did die hard. Where's Kaken? Izuku looked around, not seeing the boy. Kirishima smiled at him, waving at him. Hey, you're Midoriya, right? I'm Dash. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Tell me where he is. Who's that? He hummed to himself, looking around. Never mind. If you can't tell me where Kaken is, can you tell me where Bakugu is? Oh, he's nowhere special, just... You don't know where he is? Well, I do. Then where is he? Kirishima pouted slightly. He'll be back any minute. He'll be back any minute. That's what he said. Izuku smirked. So the boy was either with his homeroom teacher or being checked out by recovery girl. Izuku nodded, spinning on his heel to go see for himself. Hey, wait! Izuku turned. Thanks for not helping me. I'm gonna go see them now. Bye-bye. Wah, but... Kirishima spluttered. Bakugu isn't even gonna be done with recovery girl for another few minutes. It's best to just leave him alone. Izuku snickered to himself, walking out of their classroom without looking back. Kaken picked up some of the oddest people and made them his friends. Hopefully they'd have the sense to keep their distance from him and avoid telling him what to do with his Kaken. That might not end well for them. Izuku giggled to himself, shaking those thoughts from his head as he turned the corner. No need to think about these things when they wouldn't be happening. He made his way quickly towards the nurse's office, rounding the corner as quietly as he could and peered into the rooms. eyes softening when he heard Kaken throw a fit about Recovery Girl wrapping up a few of his wounds since she couldn't heal them with a kiss. He smirked, happy to hear the boy was well enough to protest against the nurse, and carefully made his way back out of the nurse's office, knowing full well that Kaken hated it when Izuku saw him in a vulnerable state. He closed the door, standing there for a few more seconds before sighing to himself and walking away, satiated for the moment. Izuku shook himself out of it, going down to the basement and walking confidently through the steel doors, amused when he saw Maijima flinch at the sound. He watched the teacher sigh. Midoriya. Izuku nodded. Maijima. What are you doing here? Maijima asked as Izuku got closer, standing near the teacher's desk that he sat at. What is she doing? Izuku asked, ignoring the man's question as he gazed at the back lab rooms, all sealed off with a thicker steel door than their classroom one. Maijima sighed. Hatsum is currently inventing a new gate for UA. She thinks she has made improvements for the security of the school. Izuku hummed. Smart. He walked off, past the two others he usually sees and hears this early, and took a deep breath, hand on the door handle. Trackers, Izuku said, slamming the door open and strutting towards Mei, leaning back as a spare piece of metal flew by his head. Mei lit up. I love trackers. What do you need them for? My #1 customer. Izuku smirked, dropping the blueprints on her desk. Explosive kid, Class 1A. His shoes need a few modifications. Modifications? Her eyes gleamed. He tapped the paper. I only want these modifications, nothing else. She pouted for a second before bouncing back. Okay, what else? Izuku grinned, pulling out another blueprint. I want his gauntlets smaller. He needs mobility. Too true, she murmured. He walks around his gauntlets and it is the weirdest thing. Izuku nodded. A true fashion travesty. Only his, Mei asked suddenly. Izuku tilted his head. You want these changes in all of Class A's shoes? Mei tried to clarify. Izuku tilted his head further. He really only meant to keep track of Kaken, but the others could benefit from it as well. He shrugged. Sure, them too. Mei grinned, turning back to her things. Good idea, Midori. 62, 334, 121. Izuku grinned, grabbing his papers and folding them under his arm. Thanks, Mei. Anytime, moneymaker. Izuku walked out, content with his work. He went through the rest of his school day ignoring his peers and doing his best to keep his head down during classes. When he was finally released, Izuku shot out of his chair and raced his way towards Kaken's future agency, bursting through the doors and walking up the stairs, and into his Kaken's future office. He sat down, dumping his bag at the side of the desk, and sighed as he turned the computer on, glancing at the monitor. He had been working on a code for the better part of a month, though he had only truly been motivated in finishing it over the past weekend. Out of curiosity, Izuku had been trying to figure out the perfect way to hack into UA's servers. Now, though, he needed to be able to do such a thing. With Kaken being attacked and UA bumping up security measures, now was the perfect time to finish the code, upload it, pray to all the gods, and hope it would stick long enough for Izuku to learn who had been responsible for Kaken's injuries. He spent the better part of the night locked up in the office, watching as the code slowly went through, praying he didn't mess up and waste most of the month on a faulty code. Finally, around 5 in the morning, Izuku was granted access into UA's private network and quickly got to work. He pulled up the USJ feed and watched the attack happen several different times, noting down every significant thing that seemed to happen, including when they announced themselves. Izuku smirked. These villains were a bit too careless, just throwing their names out there like Izuku wouldn't be able to find them through that alone. How stupid of them. How so very stupid. Chapter 12. Love Me Like a Desert Rose. Summary. Izuku meets All for One and writes a sort of love letter. Chapter text. Izuku hummed to himself, walking down the sidewalk, idling counting the number of bricked buildings he'd passed so far. He turned down an alley, pulling his hood up as he did so and slipped through the bar door. "We're closed," someone yelled out, their scratchy voice louder than the sounds of a video game playing. Someone stood behind the bar counter, a man made of mist, and continued to wipe down the same glass over and over again. Izuku walked down the hallway silently, glancing over at the TV in front of the couch that was showing some game. A blue-haired man sat on the couch, completely focused on his game, pinkies sticking outwards. Izuku sat at the bar, adjusting his stool for a moment before leaning back, an easy smile situated on his face. "Kurogyri, may I get a lemonade?" The mist man stared at him, his yellow eyes looking into his soul for a moment before he slowly nodded. "What flavor of lemonade would you like, sir?" "Call me Deku," Izuku demanded before looking around. "And raspberry lemonade would be great." Kurogyri bowed his head. "Of course, Deku." "Who the fuck are you?" Shigaraki growled, hands scratching furiously at his neck. Izuku paid him no attention as he looked around for a moment longer, glancing at the doors and making sure he did his math right about how long it would take for Kurogyri to react to something. Izuku sighed to himself, offering Kurogyri a smile when the man brought back his lemonade in a glass, setting it before him. "Thank you, Kurogyri." The man bowed his head. "You're welcome, Deku." 61, 887, 912. Izuku's smile brightened. "What are you doing here?" Shigaraki asked, still scratching roughly at his neck. Izuku smirked. "I simply wanted some lemonade, and I'm a paying customer. What else would I be doing here besides drinking?" "Fuck you." "Shigaraki, mind your manners." "Who is that?" Izuku asked, head tilted. He hadn't accounted for a third party being involved tonight. Shigaraki's eyes lit up. "Sensei." "That's wonderful." Izuku rolled his eyes. "I need an actual name, genius." "I use many names, but you may call me All for One, Young One." The voice from the radio spoke up. Izuku hummed. "That is quite a unique name. Thank you." "Please." Izuku sucked on his teeth. "Do not take that as a compliment." There was silence in the bar before the radio cracked, the man on the other side laughing through the monitor. Shigaraki looked shocked. "You don't respect Sensei?" "Why would I?" "I really don't like you." Izuku grinned. "You shouldn't." "Kurogyri, please." The man, All for One, spoke, sounding exasperated. Kurogyri bowed and turned towards Izuku. He said nothing, simply waved his hand and a portal appeared below him. He had no time to shout or cry out as he fell through, landing roughly. He stumbled through the portal, looking around and trying to hide his surprise when he was met with an imposing man seated in a lone chair in an empty warehouse. He had a suit on, a smirk intact, and no eyes. "I am All for One, my child." He introduced himself as he stood, making himself look bigger than he had sitting down. Izuku looked him up and down. "So you're the one in charge around here?" "I'll say that I am not a mere pawn in this game." He smiled to himself as he slowly walked around, seemingly loving his own wordplay. "What are you?" Izuku hummed. "I'm not sure yet." "Good answer." Izuku rolled his shoulders, trying to hide the shiver that raced up his spine. "Thank you." "You interest me, Deku." All for One hummed out the words as he stopped walking around him and gracefully sat back down on the chair, crossing his legs. "I'd love to see what else you're capable of in the meantime." Izuku blinked, hardly understanding the sentiment until a hard wind blew him through one of Kurogyri's portals, and he landed in the bar, stumbling on his feet for a moment as he caught himself. "You," Shigaraki growled. "Let him leave." All for One called out from the radio, stopping Shigaraki in his tracks. He snarled. "But, Sensei." "No, child. He was misguided." All for One cooed, calming him as he spoke. All for One's attention refocused and seemed to be directed at Izuku as he walked out. We do not wish to harm the misguided here. Izuku pushed open the bar door, letting it slam shut as he hurried out of the area. As much as he hated to admit it, he was a little out of his depth with this situation. Fuck. Izuku groaned, rubbing at his eyes as he picked up his pencil again. He'd been working on an essay in hopes of ignoring what happened back in Kamino, but of course that never really worked out for him. Instead, Izuku wondered why he hadn't heard of a villain named All for One before and why the name yielded no results when he looked into it. Even in history books, Bibles, myths, anything using All for One as a moniker has never come up before, which meant he had absolutely zero clue about him and zero clue about how to keep him away from Katsuki. He forced his attention back to his notebook, annoyed at the lack of words on the page. Izuku bit his lip, trying to think about anything other than what was running through his brain. The last thing he wanted to do was a school project on heroes and their heroism. Really, he knew it would help him calm down once he started. But Izuku couldn't figure out how to dedicate an essay to a hero without getting annoyed. With his patience wearing thin, he flipped the page and shrugged to himself as he began to write. Dear heroes, it's odd to me that you deserve an educational essay dedicated to you. It doesn't make sense to me. Heroes aren't morality police, nor are they philanthropists. I cannot understand why we would use an essay to write to you like a child would write a letter to Santa Claus. Nonetheless, I want a good grade. So here we are. My first point includes figuring out why exactly we believe we are following along a hero's guide on how to live as one when, in fact, I've never seen a single hero advocate for the material being shown to us. Now, it is true that a wonderful educator and heroine, Midnight, assigned us this essay, along with Present Mike, also a hero and educator. And yes, UA High is a school dedicated towards producing the best and brightest heroes, staffed and run by all types of heroes. But where do we draw the line? When do we claim the ability to know right from wrong, or is that already attributed to the heroic influence in our country? Can civilians claim to know what makes a good person, or is that something only a hero is capable of learning? Tell me, why do I need to take the word of a hero who has never made an effort in creating a peaceful world for us? If I'm being honest, I'd argue I only know two heroes that have fought for a better tomorrow for everyone in Japan. All Might has, of course, made impossible feats become possible. The man is literally named the symbol of peace, and for good reason. He has created the most peaceful era Japan has seen since pre-Quirk days, dating past the First Quirk War. Sure, he's capable of changing the weather with a punch, but All Might decided to use his power for the greater good of Japan. It probably cost him everything to stay on that pedestal we put him on. So he deserves to be considered a hero in all aspects. The second hero I believe is working towards a better tomorrow is a hero by the name Lord Explosion Murder, or, more likely, Dynamite. I grew up watching this hero command a room with a change of posture. I grew up watching this hero become so much stronger than a mere quirk. He has truly shown me that he's willing to create a better tomorrow for the future of heroics, no matter the cost. He's a man of resilience, someone who could be named the symbol of victory, and I wouldn't blink twice. He's someone who's overcome many obstacles to get where he is today. He is a hero. He is someone I'd listen to, even as my hearing fails me and my eyes glaze over. I would always find a way to listen to what he has to say. Dynamite is my hero. And he. I am here, I am here, I am here. Izuku blinked, glancing over at his alarm clock and staring at it for a few seconds before finally shutting it off and letting his head drop to his desk, pushing the essay away from him as he did so. He glared at the ground, trying to get his thoughts in order. Izuku needed to help Kaken. That much was obvious. He had no desire to help Japan, but he had made a promise to himself that he would make sure Kaken got every opportunity to become a hero. And All for One was in his way. He heard someone lightly knock on his bedroom door and answered with a grunt. Cracked open. Izuku. He smiled. Yes, Naomasa? Why is your light still on? You didn't stay up the whole night. Did you? Izuku blinked, his head popping up and stumbling out of his chair to make his way over to Naomasa. You're a detective. Dash. You're a detective. Izuku's smile grew wider and wider as he looked at the man. Dash. Come on. Izuku tugged at his arm, ready to race over to the station. We got so much to do and plan for. Izuku. Naomasa pulled his arm back, looking him up and down. You need to tell me what's happening first. He blinked. All for One keeps stealing Kaken from me. I need you to stop that. Naomasa's jaw dropped. All for One? You're sure? Izuku rolled his eyes at the man. Yes, and I agree with you. It's a stupid name, but I can't care, 'cause I need him to leave Kaken alone. His name is All for One? Yes. Izuku stared at the man with a slight frown. All for One. That was the name he gave me. He gave Yo. Naomasa gripped onto Izuku. Did you meet All for One? In person? Izuku blinked. Yes. Why? Well, I certainly didn't meet the man on purpose, Naomasa. Don't be silly. Why? Did you meet him in the first place? I didn't mean to. But why? Izuku shrugged. That doesn't matter. It really, really does, kid. Really? Really, really? Naomasa confirmed, staring at him intently. Izuku sighed. I was actually trying to find Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Naomasa blinked. The villains from the USJ attack? How did you even know about them? People talk. MHM. Well, it's true. Izuku defended himself. Naomasa looked at him. Why were you trying to find them? That doesn't matter. It does. It doesn't need to matter. Is it about what happened to your friend? Izuku stiffened and Naomasa kept talking. You know that entire class is safe now and we're almost positive this won't happen again. Izuku looked at Naomasa then. He needs to be safe. The biggest threat to his safety right now is the two villains, and All for One decided to try and disturb his training again, so if you would kindly follow me to the station, I believe I have some information for you. This is about your friend? Izuku shrugged. So what if it is? Naomasa paused, looking into Izuku's eyes and searching for something before he nodded. All right, let's go. They walked out and drove over to the station in silence, hardly glancing at each other as they did so. The entire process happened so quickly, Izuku thought he would have missed it if he blinked. Heroes running into the station, raids being set up at a conference table meters away from where he sat, a paper water cup in front of him as he recited every single detail he could remember to Naomasa more times than he cared to count. He watched them run around him, and Sansa was kind enough to take him back home where he could only hold his mother and make sure she didn't stress herself out the entire night. Izuku gnawed at his lip, letting his leg bounce as he sat on the couch, his mother's hands holding onto his arm, obviously trying to support him and calm him down while she freaked out. He bit at his fingernails, trying to ignore the fact that he had put Tsukachi and a whole bunch of heroes in danger. He went to his room, trying to breathe for a moment by himself when he heard something. Something knocked on his bedroom window again, and Izuku frowned, listening intently. It hit it again, and Izuku stood up, looking at his window to find out what was wrong. He made eye contact with Kaken, who was standing out there, his hands positioned to throw another rock at his window. Izuku swallowed heavily. Oh no. Chapter 13. Lay it before your feet. Izuku cracked open his window, sticking his head out. Kaken, what a surprise. Shut up and get down here. Kaken glared at him, looking very impatient. Izuku winced. Right about that. I'll come up there if you don't come outside in the next 30 seconds. Kaken warned him. Izuku turned around, walked out of his bedroom door and ran over to the front door, running outside without shoes, basketball shorts, and a muscle shirt on. He ran around the apartment building, seeing Kakin walking with his hands in his pockets towards the public park right next door. He ran after him, not wanting to lose sight of the boy at night. Kakin. Izuku glared at the boy, running closer when he watched his friend ignore him. Kakin. Every time I think I have your rat brain figured out, you go and do something different. Katsuki spoke up, slowly turning around to face Izuku. I just don't understand it. Izuku blinked at the boy. What don't you understand? I'm glad you asked, Deku. Katsuki smiled, walking forward as a hand sparked. I don't understand what you're doing. I never understand, but you always have a reason for doing something. Don't you? Izuku flicked his eyes around the park, looking at the wooden playset, the 2 oak trees, the lonely apple tree next to the new park bench, and glanced back at Katsuki, backing up a few steps as the boy continued to stalk closer. Usually, I suppose. Katsuki grinned, pointing a finger at him and shaking his hand a bit. You see, that's what I always thought, but I just can't understand, for the life of me, why you would go to Kamino and then, not 6 hours later, the heroes announced they've captured Shigaraki and Kurojairi in a surprise raid. Izuku grit his teeth as he feigned confusion. Who's that? Katsuki nodded, his eyebrows moving up and down as he looked over Izuku. So that's how you're going to play this? He shrugged. I have no idea what you're talking about. How about I remind you? Katsuki suggested, glaring at him as his hands sparked. Izuku swallowed and tried to laugh it off. You know, that seems like it wouldn't help my spotty memory. Katsuki's lips pulled into a cruel smirk. Then I hope, for your sake, that you can remember what I'm talking about. Izuku watched him carefully, trying to find anything in his expression that would prove he was lying. He raised his hands, sparks flying and explosions popping, and Izuku glanced at him, pretending to be unaffected with the threat. He yawned. Kakin, really? Katsuki's face dropped for a moment, something unfamiliar flashing in his eyes before they hardened, and he shoved Izuku. He fell, landing roughly on his butt, and looked up to see Katsuki tower over him. Kakin. This doesn't need to be difficult, Deku. Just tell me what you remember. Katsuki demanded, hands aimed towards him. Izuku moved his hands to show his surrender, staring into his eyes. Why does this matter so much to you? It doesn't. Izuku raised an eyebrow and smiled at the boy. That's how you're going to play this? Katsuki frowned, his nose flaring as sparks flew around his hands. Don't try to use my words against me. Izuku shrugged. Sorry, Kakin. Tell me what the hell you were doing with those villains. Katsuki tilted his head then, smirking a bit. Unless, of course, you're keeping quiet because you're actually working with them. Izuku's eyes flashed as he leaned up. You think I would work with villains that attacked you? Katsuki shrugged. You tell me. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How was I supposed to know? Katsuki seethed. You aren't telling me anything. So, that doesn't mean I'd ever work against you. So you're not working with the villains. You obviously know who they are. How? Why? Izuku rolled his eyes. One question at a time, please. How? They weren't exactly subtle. Neither are you. Izuku scoffed. I'm better than they are. Oh, I bet. Katsuki mocked. Why? Why what? Katsuki poked him in the chest. Why do you know who they are? Why do you even care? Izuku shoved his hand away, glaring at the boy. Why would I care? Is that a question that I really need to answer? Katsuki shrugged. I'm not sure. I mean, first you're hanging out with villains that attacked my class, and then the heroes magically figure out where they are and seize their base of operations. Wouldn't that mean I'm not working against you? It means you've spoken with villains, and I want to know why. Izuku shrugged. None of your business. Katsuki raised his eyebrows and stepped closer. None of my business? This is exactly my business. Why? Why does it matter so much to you? It doesn't. Izuku scoffed. You could have fooled me. I'm not the one with secrets here. Katsuki defended himself. You're the one who's being evasive. Evasive? Yeah, and you know what? What? Izuku shot back, staring into his eyes. Katsuki glared at him. You're the one with fucking issues between the two of us. Oh, really? Really? Izuku shook his head, taking a step back from the idiot in front of him. You can be so unbelievably dense sometimes. Ha! He rolled his eyes. To think this is all over some villains that were bothering you. Well, you're welcome. They shouldn't be bothering your training anymore since I helped throw them in jail. But no, there's no need to thank me or anything. Just yell at me until you understand your feelings, and I'll go on my merry way. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. You really think that's what I'm doing? You want me to spell out my feelings for you, then? Fine. When I found out that you were the dumbfuck who put those villains behind bars, I wasn't happy because you weren't supposed to be in that kind of danger. You were supposed to be at home, pretending to work on homework while you frolicked around the city and did whatever you spent your time doing. Katsuki sighed. I don't like hearing about you acting like a reckless hero idiot. So what? Izuku shot back. Who cares if that's what I did? I'm smarter than you think. And besides, I'm not acting like a hero. I'm just doing the right thing. That's all. At least we can agree on one thing. Katsuki growled back. You're no hero. I can't believe I built a fucking agency for an idiot like you. Izuku grumbled, not thinking about his words. What? Izuku paused, staring into Kaken's eyes. What? Deku, what did you just say? I don't think it's all that important. Tell me or I'll blast you into the moon and you'll become yet another crater on that planet. Izuku pursed his lips, ignoring the ache in his heart as he looked at Katsuki. Well, I got you something for your future. MMHM. Izuku sighed, giving up. It might be easier to just show you. You think so? Kaken said, obviously ready to fight against it. Izuku nodded, turning around and walking towards the city. Yep, it'll make things 10 times easier. Kaken huffed, but didn't say anything else as they walked towards his agency downtown. He didn't speak the entire walk, simply stayed silent as Katsuki walked by his side, hands in pockets as he casually walked alongside him. He found it odd that Katsuki could follow along with him easily, as if he's walked this route before, but he didn't dwell on it as they came up on the agency. Izuku took a deep breath, pulling out his keys and walking up to the front door with Katsuki right on his heels. What are we doing here? Katsuki frowned, looking around the outside of the building with increasing interest. Izuku huffed, unlocking the door and holding it open. After you. Katsuki scoffed, but walked inside regardless and looked around, confused for a moment until Izuku turned on the lights. He watched Katsuki take it all in, feeling mildly embarrassed when he watched Katsuki smile at the color scheme around the place, with black and copper being the main piece he had put in. There weren't any logos or anything painted onto the walls, mostly because Izuku wasn't sure what Katsuki would like best, but it was quite obviously built with the boy in mind. Everything from the flooring to the light fixtures were designed for him and to his tastes. Not many people would realize it, but Katsuki was more than most people. Izuku saw the moment it clicked for him. Katsuki looked up, finally seeing the ceiling. Izuku had gotten an artist to come in and paint the historical picture of the First Quirk War, with explosions in the background and soldiers fighting other soldiers in a beautifully tragic painting. It was the one war Katsuki enjoyed learning about and the reason he actually paid attention in history class. Once, when they were children, Katsuki had pointed out the picture for a picture book and explained that he was destined to be the general leading soldiers just like that. He said it was basically a painting of what he would be doing in the future. He was determined to be the strongest of the strong, ever since a young age, and although Katsuki attributed that dream to his admiration for All Might, Izuku knew that Katsuki had fallen in love with the idea of becoming a general as soon as he was told about the First Quirk War. He watched silently as Katsuki looked around, turning slowly on his heels with his head tilted up to take it all in, not saying anything until he seemed to huff out a small laugh. "Ha! I didn't think that's what you were doing in here." Izuku frowned. "Excuse me?" Kaken waved him off. "Doesn't matter. Why did you make me an agency?" Izuku scowled. "For your future." "But why?" "Because you needed one. I got one." Kaken smirked as he turned towards him. "I see." Izuku nodded. "MHM. I didn't realize you were so invested in me." "Your future," Izuku corrected. "Right?" Kaken's smirk grew. "My future." "Yep." Kaken winked at him. "I wasn't too far off when I used to call you my stalker, was I?" Huh. "Following me to UA, getting rid of the last of the villains that attacked my class, a fucking agency built for me. Seriously, Deku, it's like you didn't even try to hide it." Kaken taunted him. Izuku felt his heart stutter, trying not to breathe in too noticeably, his mind being clouded over with the smell of caramel and cinnamon. Was he high? He felt like he might be. Maybe he should go to the doctor after this. Nothing to say anymore? Kaken grinned at him, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Izuku swallowed, feigning a shrug as he said the first thing that came to mind. "It's not my fault you like it." Kaken scowled. "I'm just used to it." "MMHM?" Izuku smirked, tilting his head, watching his friend's eyes dart to his exposed neck. How interesting. He wondered what that meant. Kaken rolled his pretty red eyes. "Whatever." He looked at him intently before looking around again. "This looks good, Deku. It's certainly a better use of your time than other things are. You did well." Izuku's heart soared as he listened to his friend, wondering if that was him apologizing for their earlier fight. "Thanks, Kaken. And I'm sorry for saying." "TCH, that doesn't matter, so don't be sorry." He looked at him intently, searching his eyes for something. Izuku had no idea if he found it, but eventually Kaken nodded and looked around one last time. "I'm going back. You comin'?" Izuku grinned. "I'm right behind you, Kaken." Kaken paused and smirked at that, nodding to himself before walking towards the front doors. He held the doors open and looked over his shoulder. "Try to keep up, Deku." Izuku jogged over, standing right behind his Kaken as he grabbed the door and followed him out, pushing him forwards lightly with his hand on the boy's hip. "Like I said, I'm right behind you." Kaken looked over his shoulder, staring at Izuku for a few seconds before coughing awkwardly and walking forward, nodding to himself. Izuku shrugged, locking up before joining his friend on the sidewalk, content to walk him home tonight. It was a silent walk back, though they walked closer together, occasionally knocking shoulders and brushing hands with each other. Izuku felt like he was experiencing a heart attack every time it happened, though he couldn't stop himself from seeking out the next accidental touch, enjoying the sensation that traveled up his spine each time like it was the first. He wondered if that made him a masochist. He stopped in front of his house, staring at it for a moment before Kaken cleared his throat and began walking away from him, towards his own house. "Good night," Izuku called, watching as Kaken walked back home. He watched as Kaken turned around, still walking, and smirked at him, nodding a bit and stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Try not to dream about me, Deku." Izuku grinned, as if he would ever go to sleep without dreaming about Kaken. I'll do my best." Kaken turned back around and finally walked out of view. Izuku took a deep breath and shook himself out as he breathed. That happened. The complicated feelings stirring inside him had awakened something within him, and he had been able to get through it well enough. Hopefully those feelings don't come back when he's around Kaken again. They made it very difficult to focus on whatever Kaken was saying to him. He wondered if Kaken felt those kinds of feelings too. He wondered if he was sadistic for wanting Kaken to feel the same way. Chapter 14. Forbidden Desires. Kaken. He turned around, a bright look in his eyes as he looked at the boy in front of him. Deku. He watched intently as Deku rolled his eyes at the nickname. The boy always smiled after he called him that name, looking entirely too self-satisfied for Katsuki to have a healthy blood pressure. Look, Deku grinned, leaning closer to him. I designed this just for you. Katsuki licked his lips, his breath coming in short as he realized how close Deku was. Just for me. Deku smiled, leaning closer, the ghost of his breath caressing his neck as he whispered, You know I only have eyes for you, Kaken. He breathed out, sucking in another breath as he locked eyes with him, his red staring into his green, and he felt his eyelids droop. Prove it. Something primal flashed in Deku's eyes as he stood, towering over Katsuki and leant down to be face to face with him. His hands braced on either side of Katsuki. He was trapped, and yet he had never felt more free. Deku brought his hand to Katsuki's jaw, his thumb brushing along his bottom lip. Katsuki opened his lips slightly and leant back against the wall, watching with fascination as Deku's eyes blew wide. Are you sure? Deku whispered, his other hand coming to rest at his hip, pushing him against the wall fully. Katsuki let out a shuddering breath. God, yes. Deku smirked, his eyes basically stripping Katsuki naked as he looked him over. So eager, aren't you? Don't you know good things come to those who wait? Katsuki shook his head. We don't need to wait. Oh! Deku clicked his tongue, his lips so close to his own that Deku was breathing his next words into Katsuki. Where's the fun in giving you what you want now? Katsuki groaned, his head knocking against the wall, though his hands never left Deku's body, one tangling itself into his curly hair while the other ran up his stomach, feeling surprised at the defined abs he was trailing. What do you want from me, Deku? Everything you can give me. He responded quickly, equally as incapable of pulling away from Katsuki as he was. He breathed out carefully. What if I give you all of me? Deku grinned, golden green eyes flashing dangerously. All of you? That's a dangerous sentence, Kaken. I know what it means. Deku hummed, a smile tugging at his lips as he moved with Katsuki, hands never leaving him while they stood in each other's space. He stared at Katsuki's lips and he made himself wet them, feeling a thrum of pleasure when Deku licked his own in response. You sure about this? Katsuki nodded quickly. I've been sure about this my entire life. Deku hummed again, getting closer. If I get you now, then I want you. Forever. Katsuki looked into his eyes. Then I want the same from you. Deku blinked, his eyes flashing with an emotion Katsuki couldn't quite identify. He opened his mouth, intent to answer until he started drifting away, a chasm developing between them as Katsuki tried to reach out and pull Izuku back into his arms. I am here, I am here, I am here. Katsuki snapped his eyes open and huffed as the alarm went off, glaring at his ceiling before pushing himself out of bed. He wasn't a fan of mornings. The act of getting out of bed seriously took so much of Katsuki's energy that he wanted to scream at everything he saw. It was one of the many reasons Katsuki made it his mission not to speak to anyone before lunch, although that was always difficult with Deku always sitting right behind him, talking his ear off in the sacred mornings. Now that they were in UA and that weird kid that had balls for hair sat behind him, he didn't need to speak to anyone if he didn't feel like it and often spent his mornings ignoring Four Eyes who reprimanded him for not wearing his tie every day. The worst part about the mornings, though, was something he couldn't even control. His fucking dreams. He couldn't go to bed without dreaming of Deku whispering in his ear at night, always sending chills up his spine with an unidentifiable pleasure humming in his bones whenever his attention was directed onto him. He swore he was going to horny hell after the amount of twisted dreams he's had with Deku as the main star of the show. Which isn't exactly the first thought anyone wants to have in the goddamn morning. But it's one Katsuki finds himself repeating often enough he's starting to wonder how many more insane things his brain will find to conjure up and turn into wet dreams for him late at night. If he's being honest with himself, he's a bit worried that anyone with a mind-reading Quirk would keel over as soon as they get a glimpse inside his brain because of all the depraved things running rampant in his mind. He moved around and got ready, throwing his uniform tie in the back of his closet and leaving the top 2 buttons undone as he pulled on his blazer. As much as he hated not doing things to perfection, the way he wore his uniform was an odd exception he's come to enjoy. It was imperfectly perfect, with Katsuki spending his time to carefully make sure each piece of his uniform was out of order in some way, no matter how small. He walked out of the hall and into the family room, where his father was sitting in the armchair and reading the newspaper with his reading glasses pushed up high on the bridge of his nose. The news station was on, though his father had that muted as he multitasked, and Katsuki couldn't help but wonder if that's what he'll be doing in a few years when he moves out. He vowed to himself never to buy reading glasses to delay his horrid future. "Brat, where's my kiss?" his ma called out. Katsuki rolled his eyes and moved towards the entryway, uninterested in dealing with his ma's antics this morning. "Up my ass. Katsuki, mind your language," his pa warned, rolling his eyes as he flipped through the newspaper. He huffed, "I don't wanna this morning." "Fine," his ma agreed as she walked around the corner and pushed a bento in his hands. She dusted her apron off, picking at a few lint pieces on it as she spoke again. "Take that to school and don't be so prickly with your friends." "I'm not," Katsuki found himself arguing. His ma looked at him oddly, as if she knew that was the weakest argument he could have thrown back at her, and she shrugged. "Whatever, just be careful, brat, and make sure to knock some kids down during training." "Mitsuki," his pa huffed, flipping the newspaper again. "Cats, don't beat any of those idiots up unless you can give me 3 good reasons." "Suki, didn't we talk about not telling him to hurt those other kids?" He watched his ma roll her eyes and silently mock his pa for a moment before winking at him and replying to Masaru. "I remember us talking about not telling cats to explode other kids. That falls under the umbrella of not telling him to hurt other kids." "Suki," his pa replied, sounding tired already. Katsuki barely refrained from laughing at them as he slipped out the front door unnoticed while they argued. His parents meant well, but they were terrible at communicating, which was, unfortunately, something they passed down to him. He was trying, though. Last night, talking it out with Deku, that was new for him. Ever since his acceptance into UA, he started to realize the world didn't revolve around him, and he took advantage of whatever he had going with Deku. The attack at the USJ rattled him a bit, reminding him that he wasn't the big dog right then, just a hero in training, a little more than a small nuisance to deal with. Hell, All Might had to rescue him from Shigaraki's pet Nomu and the guy's scary talons during the attack. It was as groundbreaking as it was worrying. He spent most of his days training after school now, especially so since the USJ incident. He couldn't afford to fall behind the other students more than he already was. Despite him fooling them into believing that he thinks he's the shit and the best at everything, he knows where his strengths truly landed, and he's struggling to figure out how to deal with it all. But the worst problem was that he had no free time anymore, which meant he had no time to watch Deku. He refused to call it stalking, mostly because he wasn't creepy about it like Deku was, writing things down in his notebooks that no one should know about him. Hell, he remembered the time Deku tried to play off the fact that he had exact measurements for Katsuki's forearms when he was showing him a new design for his gauntlet pieces, which probably would be disturbing to anyone else. But, luckily for him, Katsuki wasn't just anyone else. He stepped on the train car, moving to his usual spot in the back, and stared out the window, waiting. Right on time, Deku came running through the crowd and onto the neighboring car, finding a spot to hold onto somewhere in the middle. Katsuki watched him the entire ride, completely at peace as he did so. It was an odd thing to feel, but when he did this, that's all he could bring himself to feel. There was something soothing about watching over Deku from afar and making sure he was staying out of trouble. something Katsuki had no intention of explaining to himself in fear of ruining his experience. He lost track of him for a moment and his heart stuttered, eyes flicking around wildly as he tried to place where Deku had gone. He spotted his full head of green, curly hair quickly enough, finally calming his heart back down to an appropriate level and breathed out slowly, annoyed when the train doors opened and Deku walked out. Katsuki followed him from a distance, scowling when some pink-haired girl walked next to Deku the entire way to school, stealing all of his attention as the two talked about things he wasn't privy to understanding. He slipped into his homeroom quickly enough, beyond annoyed at seeing most of his classmates already seated and talking loudly. He sat down and dropped his bag, shoving his face in his arms as he tried to block out the noise and did his best to avoid blowing up on the idiots that surrounded him. When that didn't work, Katsuki pulled his textbook out of his bag, opening it up to the spot he had left off last night, and began trying to read as he ignored the yells of laughter from his peers. "Does anyone here have a crush or anything?" he heard Kaminari ask out near him, poking Katsuki teasingly on the shoulder. He growled, but the other boy was far from deterred. "Bakugu, you got anything to tell us?" "Die," he huffed, eyes fixated on the same paragraph in his book that it had been for the entire time. "You're more prickly than usual. Someone poop in your shoes or something?" Siro asked, laid out in his chair as he let Mina file his nails. Katsuki rolled his eyes. "How about you idiots just leave me the hell alone?" "No can do, brother," Kaminari grinned, slapping his shoulder and scrambling back into his area when Katsuki glared at him. "Besides, don't you get bored of this lone wolf wannabe thing?" "Oh my god, I'm gonna murder someone," Katsuki muttered to himself, rubbing his palms in his eyes as he tried to stave off the headache he was bound to earn from entertaining Kaminari and his antics for so long. "Don't," Aizawa-sensei called out, staring at him seriously for a few moments until the bell rang and everyone settled down, getting ready for Aizawa's official homeroom announcements. Class went on as normal and Katsuki diligently took notes on everything they talked about, not wanting to fall behind any of his classmates. During lunch, Katsuki sat by himself, annoyed when a few of the extras from his class sat near him and talked around him, obviously enjoying each other's company. He finished early and walked around the building to clear his mind, trying to remind himself what it felt like to have some fucking peace. He glanced around when he heard someone's shoe scuff the ground, his heart leaping into his throat when he realized it was Deku, who was headed straight towards him. "Leave me alone," he groaned, not giving the boy a chance to say a word. He didn't know if he had the strength to talk to Deku like a normal human without falling to his knees and promising his undying loyalty. Deku grinned, his eyes alight. "Kakin is so silly sometimes. I just wanted to talk." Katsuki sighed, closing his eyes as he mustered up the strength to walk faster, hoping Deku would take the hint once in his life. He didn't. Katsuki wasn't sure if he was relieved or not. "I had an idea," Deku spoke up, seemingly happy to fill the silence. Katsuki wanted to speak up, say he had an idea too. He'd been thinking of it since he realized how much he enjoyed Deku's attention and wanted more of it a few years ago. He wanted to pull the idiot into the janitor's closet and promise himself to him. If only Deku would do the same. He groaned at his own thoughts, wanting to groan again when Deku took that as an answer. "So, your gauntlets." Katsuki rolled his eyes, finally screwing his head on straight as he spoke up. "No, they don't need to change." Deku pouted and Katsuki refused to admit he found it cute. "Come on, Kakin. They're huge." He breathed out slowly, trying not to focus on the innuendo. "They're not that big." Deku scoffed. "You walk around them." That caught Katsuki's attention. He snapped his eyes to Deku's and smirked, satisfied with the idea of Deku watching him walk around in his hero costume. "Oh, you've been watching me?" Deku shrugged, stepping closer and whispered in his ear. "No need to hide what you already know, don't you?" Katsuki sucked in a breath, willing his heart to stop trying to beat out of his chest as he tried to calm down. Jesus, he was going to dream about this later. So you're giving up? Deku chuckled lowly, the sound rattling around in his brain as a shiver slipped down his spine. Quite the opposite, Kaken. It doesn't sound that way to me. Katsuki responded, unsure if what he said made any sense as his brain began to fuzz around the edges, only coherent enough to feel the brush of Deku's hand along his waist. Deku smiled, obviously satisfied with Katsuki's state as he took him in. Don't you worry, Kaken. I'd die before I gave up. I'd die before I'd give up on you too, Katsuki wanted to say. He wanted to lean back, rest his head on Deku's shoulder and turn to kiss along his neck and make his mark on his skin, finally claiming him like he's wanted to for so long. He wanted to jump in his arms and grind against him, ready for anything Deku would be willing to give him. Instead, he nodded. Good. I don't like quitters. Deku laughed, light and airy. Katsuki felt his head spin at the sound. I'm well aware, Kaken. The bell rang and Deku gave him a heated look he didn't know what to do with. Think about the gauntlet changes, Kaken. I think you'd like it if you gave it a chance. He spoke, a grin on his lips as he backed away and ran off to get to his own class. Katsuki stood in the hallway, placing his hand over his heart as he tried to calm himself down, freaking out when he couldn't. He stood his way through the halls, uncaring of which class he was skipping as he walked towards his destination. He quickly burst through the nurse's doors, locating an enraged recovery girl, and didn't give her a chance to bitch him out before he started speaking. I think I'm dying. Explain, she demanded. So he did. He explained everything he was feeling around Deku, worrying over his heart especially. He explained how difficult it was to think around him and what he experienced the moment he locked eyes with the boy with increasing anxiety. He looked up at her after he was finished, unsure of when he had sat down. She glared at him. You came in here because you're in love? Katsuki shook his head quickly, even when a part of him wanted to agree. That's impossible. She stared at him and Katsuki stared back. Get out. She pointed to the door with her cane. Katsuki scowled, but did as she said without a protest. And here he thought nurses were supposed to help people in need. He stalked off, annoyed the rest of the day as he went through the motions. He took a calming breath when Aizawa said he'd be running the training this afternoon and got changed quickly enough, staring into his costume case for too long as he looked at the brand new, skinny gauntlets sitting innocently in there. He rolled his eyes, even as he put them on, and felt his heart flutter oddly, knowing for a fact that Deku had a hand in changing his design. He calmed down further as he read through the pamphlet sitting atop of them, explaining the small differences and the extra padding around his forearms so the shock of his huge blasts shouldn't affect his shoulders anymore. He spent training marveling at his new ease of movement thanks to the slimmed-down versions of the gauntlets, smiling a bit to himself when he realized he was capable of making bombs with a few of the new features when he wanted to. A large part of him wished that Deku was here, watching him with those pretty green eyes, pen in hand, recording everything Katsuki did and pointing out obvious corrections that Katsuki pretended to already know about. Katsuki stopped then, staring at nothing. Fuck! Bakugu language, Aizawa warned. He kept staring at the space in front of him, so confused about what he had just learned. He'll blame Recovery Girl for this. There's no way this would have happened without her diagnosis. No, wait. Well, Katsuki refuses. He groaned to himself, wanting to scream when he realized his dreams were about to get interesting after today's events. Fuck.